News agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope?
It's very much so.
And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very good afternoon, everybody. Patrick Christys here with you 3 till 6, and it's a big one today. As ever, Britain officially is one of the least racist countries in the world. A study has confirmed something that I think we all really knew. Hopefully, that puts the old unconscious bias lobby to bed. I'll tell you the results of that survey very shortly. In other news, though, is the civil service now just coming after anyone that they disagree with ideologically? Steve Barclay stands accused of being a bully. It follows Dominic Raab. Do you think that all those woke snowflakes in the civil service just need to get a grip? In other news, jihadi gangs have infiltrated our prisons and are forcing prisoners to convert to Islam, frankly, on pain of death. What does all of this really mean? Is it a concern going forward? Because ultimately they'll be released into the population, won't they? And finally, as well, yes, gambling problem. Now, tougher rules and regs for gamblers. Is this all right? Is this safe? Or actually, is it a curtailment on our civil liberties? Of all of that and much, much more coming your way between 3 and 6 p.m. Get your emails coming in, gbviews@gbnews.uk. What do you make of that study that now shows that Britain officially is one of the least racist countries in the world? That email address again, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Right now, though, it's your headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 2 minutes past 3. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. The Royal College, strike action planned by the Royal College of Nursing for the 2nd of May would be unlawful. A High Court judge has ruled the RCN's 6-month mandate for strike action will have lapsed by Tuesday. Protests by nurses have been taking place outside the court with signs saying silencing nurses is silencing patients. The RCN's General Secretary, Pat Cullen, says the government has lost the trust of nurses and the public.
This is the darkest day in this dispute so far. Any government that would drag their nursing staff through the courts, they've won their legal battle today, but what this has led to is they've lost nursing and they've lost the public. They've taken the most trusted profession through the courts by the least trusted people.
Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer, meanwhile, is urging the government to resolve the pay dispute.
The nurses don't want to be on strike. They want a government that's negotiating and talking to them, not taking them to court. I think most people are scratching their head and saying, instead of going to court, just get on with resolving the underlying issues. They've created the conditions that have put huge pressure on people because the economy hasn't worked for over a decade now. Many people have had stagnant wages, their living standards have gone down, not up. So the government bears a heavy responsibility, and I think most people would say, get on with it, get round the table and resolve these issues.
Downing Street insists ministers must be able to challenge civil servants robustly. It comes amid reports that concerns have been raised about Health Secretary Steve Barclay's behaviour towards colleagues. When asked about the alleged complaints, the government spokesman said ministers should be able to test and challenge civil servants and their political advisers. Downing Street claims Rishi Sunak's never been made aware of any informal concerns about Steve Barclay's conduct. The Foreign Secretary says the government's continuing to assist British nationals in leaving Sudan and has urged them to make their way to the airport for evacuation as soon as possible. British forces are racing to evacuate as many people as possible before the ceasefire ends later today. We know that so far, more than 530 British citizens have been flown to safety on 6 separate flights. Speaking in the House of Commons, James Cleverly said the UK was also looking into assisting countries with no diplomatic presence in the country.
For those on the ground, as you would expect, we are prioritising those in greatest need through allocating seats based on vulnerability, starting with families with children, the elderly, the disabled, or people with documented medical conditions. We have been notifying British nationals registered with us about the evacuation flights, as well as announcing them through our travel advice and also through organic social media networks of British nationals in Sudan.
The government has unveiled the biggest shake-up of gambling laws in 15 years. It says it aims to redress the power imbalance between punters and operators. Checks to better protect even those unable to afford small losses are among the plans, as well as maximum stakes for online slot machines. Culture Secretary Lucy Fraser says it will also help prevent addiction. Schools in England are facing disruption today as tens of thousands of teachers have gone on strike. National Education Union members have walked out over pay. Year 11 and Year 13 classes are being prioritised, with exams just weeks away. More strikes have been announced for the summer term after union members rejected the government's pay offer. Joint General Secretary of the NEU, Mary Boustad, says teachers are experiencing hardship.
We've got teachers who are skipping meals, we've got teachers not heating their homes, we've got teachers taking on second jobs when they already work the most unpaid overtime of all professions. That's the reality of what teachers are facing, and that is what the government has to face, that reality, if we want a well-educated nation and if we want the education that our children deserve.
Meanwhile, the ASLEF unions announced its train drivers will stage 3 new strikes in their long-running dispute over pay. 2 of the walkouts will happen in May, and 1 will take place on the 3rd of June, the day of the FA Cup final. It's after the union rejected a 4% pay offer. Labour peer Ruth Anderson has told GBNews the scandal engulfing Diane Abbott is depressing and that she hopes it isn't the downfall of her career. The MP for Hackney North had the Labour whip removed for comments she made in the Observer newspaper suggesting Jews hadn't experienced racism. Speaking to Gloria De Piero, the National Vice Chair of Jewish Labour, said she was tired of the anti-Semitism row continuing to plague the party.
This is sad and miserable and takes us back to a place I don't want to be in. We need to find a way through this. We need to find a way through where there is a level of dignity for Diane too, because it's really important for her community, and there is no hierarchy of racism. Racism is racism. She has had horrible experiences. I want everybody just to move forward, and we're meant to be on the same side.
This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though. It's back to you, Patrick.
Welcome along. Now, I wanted to start today with a study that undermines all the talk that racism is just rampant across the United Kingdom. A new report claims that we live in one of the least racist countries in the world. A survey of 24 top nations found that just 2% of Brits, just 2%, wouldn't want to have someone of a different race as their neighbour. And when it comes to living alongside an immigrant or foreign worker, the figure is only 5%. Now, in both categories, the UK is less racist than the United States, France, Italy, frankly, loads of countries, actually. I'm joined now by the actor and writer Femi Nylander to discuss all of this. Femi, look, thank you very much for joining me. I've got to be honest, this goes a long way to undermining, frankly, what the UN said, that Britain is a long way from being a racially just society that ethnic minorities are living in fear of systemic racism?
Well, Patrick, do you know anything about cognitive psychology and reporting bias? It's a concept, basically, which says that when survey respondents are responding to a survey, they'll often have bias. And when you want to find something out, if you ask a question of the person who is supposedly the perpetrator of the wrong, they're not going to. No one is answering the survey going, "I am a racist." You had me on a few weeks ago, and that was a survey to talk about a different survey, and that was a survey where minorities were talking about their experiences.
Would the same not apply for
and
them?
That had a very.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? So by that logic, would the same not apply for them? Because they would maybe be more inclined to say that they are suffering.
Well, that's no, but possibly. Right. You have some, but I mean, at the end of the day, if I ask someone how tall are you on a survey, if someone's 5'9", they'll probably bump it up to 6 foot or to at least 5'10".
Well, it's not Tinder, to be fair, Femi, is it? I mean,
the survey is a survey which asks British people if they feel like they're racist.
But surely there would be the same level of cognitive bias, right, in places like Iran, Russia, Japan, China, Greece, Morocco, South Korea, Egypt, Poland, Italy, the Philippines, Indonesia, Mexico, Spain, Nigeria, France, Austria, Australia, Canada, United States and Norway, all countries who scored higher than us. So do they not care about not seeming like racists, but we do, and we're the only ones who are trying to cover up our racism?
No, I don't think that's necessarily true. And I think that some of the countries you named, they do have big problems with xenophobia. No one said England is the only country in the world that has problems with xenophobia. Japan famously has had a lot of problems in the past with xenophobia and with seeing as itself as superior to the Koreans, to the Chinese, its immediate neighbours. So no one is saying England is the only country with xenophobia. No one is saying that some of the other countries don't deserve to be on the list. All I'm saying is that to say that the UK isn't racist because British people have said that they are not racist, and not to look at the evidence, not to look at some of the rhetoric which came out around Brexit, not to look at any of the institutional aspects which show that in the UK, people of minorities are disproportionately likely to be poor, disproportionately likely to be in the criminal justice system, disproportionately likely to be entitled to free school meals, disproportionately likely to be the victims of aggravated racially motivated crime. I mean, the evidence of Britain being a society which has serious problems with institutional racism are all there. And this is a survey which has asked British people, are you racist? And no one, I mean, you can't draw conclusions by saying, do you...
Well, like, to be fair, Femi, I have got to put it to you.
I'm not.
What you are doing here is just picking and choosing your evidence to suit your argument, no? That Britain is a racist.
Isn't that the same thing you're doing when you?
I didn't do this study. This is evidence.
This
is the study from the Policy Institute at King's College London. I mean, King's College London will do loads of studies.
King's College London is a British.
But if they put out a study, or something on, for example, the economy or the way that people feel on that, presumably you'd be inclined to believe that. Or why is it that when it comes to things like race, that people don't want to accept the findings?
Not necessarily. I don't necessarily trust that a study is correct because it comes out of a Russell Group UK university. Because one, I mean, all these Russell Group lists, I went to Oxford myself, right? They always put Oxford as the best university in the world, but it's always the British newspapers and the British lists that do it. And it's, of course, a British newspaper and a British list is going to put a British institution as the best in the world. The US ones, they'll put Harvard. People institutions within countries tend to support their countries. And if a UK university comes out with a report saying that the UK is one of the least racist country in the world, I'm actually less inclined to believe it.
What would you believe? So this is the issue, though, isn't it? Because what would you believe? It does sound to me, Femi, as though you're a bit disappointed that a study has shown that Britain is amongst the least racist countries in the world.
I have nothing wrong with this study. A study is they've asked the questions. A study. I'm talking about what I know. I'm talking about the facts and figures in the UK. I'm talking about the fact that in the UK, black people are 7 times more likely to be in prison. I'm talking about the fact that in the UK, I have personal friends who have been beaten up because of their race. I'm talking about the fact that in the UK, I watch GBNews all the time, and I see you talking about migrants. I see you talking about people who you don't want to come in, floods of people coming to these shores, etc., etc. I'm talking about what I know, having lived here for 28 years and been born here and grown up here and studied the actual facts and figures about racism in the UK versus a survey which basically asks people, are you racist? It doesn't ask anyone, have you experienced racism?
It asks you, it doesn't, I mean, as well, to be clear on it, I mean, if we are doing the facts, it doesn't ask people whether or not they're racist. It asks people who they would be comfortable living next door to, which is a pretty strong indication, for example, of racism. And the survey will have been conducted anonymously, so anyone could have answered in any way that they would like. So, I mean, it's done in exactly the same way as you would conduct a survey on voting intention or anything along those lines. And so I do just wonder whether or not we're veering into the territory here of discounting something.
I wasn't there. I don't know if the survey was conducted properly. I don't know if there was bias in the report.
But what you do know is that it's deeply flawed and that it's not accurate.
Did so in a way. Let me just finish. I don't know if the people asking the questions did so in a leading way, or if there was any bias in second survey. I'm just saying that what the survey finds, you opened the call and you said this goes against what the narrative is, and I'm saying that a survey which asks people, do you feel like you're racist, or do you feel like
it doesn't ask them that though.
The evidence that British people don't want to live next door to Polish people and ethnic minorities is that en masse they voted to leave the EU largely because of the fact that they said, and they're documented.
But that would, and everyone would have known, would have led to more immigration from the subcontinent and Africa. So anyone who really voted to leave the European Union because they thought that it would lead to lower ethnic minority was seriously misguided.
That's not what I'm saying. Don't put words in my mouth. I'm just saying that we know a lot of people voted to leave the European Union because they didn't want Polish people around and they don't want Africans around. And a lot of people think that we should be sending asylum seekers off to Rwanda because they don't want to welcome people into this country.
But again, it's if you really ask people,
these are the facts. And
but they're not though, are they? Because again, if you really ask people, it's about illegal economic migrants. It's not just about people that they don't like the colour of or they don't like their religion. And again, this is another thing in this. It also asks them about.
Migrants aren't the same thing.
It also asks them about. Well, you see, this is
talking about international law here.
Right, okay,
international law. We're talking about international law and the idea that when someone arrives at your country, they're supposed to be basically granted at least a chance of claiming asylum. If not, they're processed, they're sent home. And we're talking about a international law. No other country in the world, by the way, so saying the UK is one of the least racist countries in the world, or no other country at the moment that I know has a policy of sending asylum seekers off to the other side of the world to a country with a questionable human rights record because they don't want to have to process their claims.
It's interesting you should say that, actually, because the European Union are desperately trying to do something very, very similar and indeed have actually created outposts in Turkey. So that, again, unfortunately for me, is not accurate. So, there is that gaping flaw in there again. Just to round this off, you do not accept that Britain is one of the least racist countries in the world. You just don't accept that.
I don't accept that Britain is one of the least racist countries in the world. I don't think it's the most racist country in the world. I didn't ever say that some of the people on this list, some of the countries on this list, the United States, as I say, has serious problems with xenophobia. Japan has serious problems with xenophobia. The UK has serious problems with xenophobia. All I've said is that this survey, which goes to people and says, do you feel like you are racist, is not as clear evidence as.
But again, Femi, it doesn't say that, does it? And this is the thing.
The survey that you invited me in to discuss the other day, it was a few weeks ago. That was a survey which asked minorities, do you feel? Have you had experiences of racial aggravation? That had a completely different. It had a completely
it did, but unfortunately, where I can't help but feel as though it falls down, and I appreciate this discussion, Femi, I really do. Is if you're using the logic that people have entered into this with bias and maybe are looking to get some form of answer out of it, then the same thing has to apply to that, doesn't it?
That's the problem with surveys. That's the problem with what's called qualitative data collection. It's qualitative research. You have quantitative research. You have qualitative and quantitative. Qualitative is like in-depth interviews, focus groups. Qualitative research is just a yes, no, A, B, C, D, and you can ask leading questions, you can have bias, and it doesn't always come up with results that are trustable. And at the end of the day, both of these reports have come up with very different results, and at the end of the day, we don't know if either of them are trustworthy. All I can talk about is what I know.
Is your own lived experience, and I understand that, and I respect it. Femi,
I'm aware of, like hard facts and figures. It's a hard fact that 7% that black people are overrepresented in the prison system.
Femi, I get that. We are going to have to move on, Femi. I'm afraid. All right, okay. Femi, thank you very much. Thank you. All right, I'll chat to you again soon. No doubt about another survey. Femi Nolander there, right, who's actor and indeed writer. So, moving on. Now, we will have lots more on that story throughout the course of the show, but now more from the moaning civil service. After getting rid of Dominic Raab, it looks like they're now out to get Steve Barclay, and it's reported that Barclay is now the subject of informal complaints about his behaviour. Downing Street has said that ministers must be able to, quote, robustly challenge civil servants, while Foreign Secretary James Cleverly has defended Barclay and said the Health Secretary is, quote, absolutely not a bully. I'm joined now by GB News' political editor Darren McCaffrey to give us a quick roundup of what's going on here. So Steve Barclay, well, accused of being a bully?
Yeah, but not in a formal sense, as you've rightly pointed out, Patrick. Reports in The Guardian today suggesting that as Health Secretary he regularly blasted staff in front of others, that he was constantly angry and that he hauls people over the coals and is generally a bit unpleasant. Now, it'll be up to people at home and indeed across the country and potentially up to the government again to decide whether that constitutes bullying. But as I say, no formal complaints have been made, and there is concern clearly across Whitehall and at the top of the Conservative Party that this is another concerted attempt to try and get rid of a cabinet minister. Now, clearly Dominic Raab had to resign after he was found guilty of bullying by an independent report, though many felt, including the former Deputy Prime Minister, that the bar, as he called it, was too low for what constituted bullying. But as you say, Downing Street not willing to react, frankly, this afternoon, suggesting that there are no formal complaints. And if you listen to senior Conservatives, they're all pretty angry that these civil servants seem to run to newspapers, leaking information and making allegations rather than making some formal complaints through due process. So it is one to watch, but for the time being, I think Steve Barclay's not going to go anywhere, and Downing Street are not going to be willing to act until there's something more concrete comes forwards.
Darren, thank you very much. Darren McCaffrey, political editor outside Westminster for us. I'm joined now in the studio by Charlie Rowley, who's a former special advisor to Michael Gove. Charlie, this is starting to look, the cynic in me would say, like any minister that the civil service don't agree with ideologically is a bully.
Well, it's ridiculous. And what Darren was saying was absolutely right. Downing Street got no reason to respond to claims that are currently unsubstantiated, where no formal complaint has been made. Of course, anybody that does have a complaint, there is a proper process in place. We saw this last week with Dom Raab, who, yes, has resigned. There were 2 counts against a total of 8. That's too many, and that's why he resigned. But the way in which the nature of the complaints went through the newspapers, things were being leaked online, all these kinds of accusations that were not
as well.
Misinformation, exactly, because some of the accusations about throwing tomatoes and shouting about people was totally bogus. It didn't come to light. So I have to say that if anybody does have a complaint, they should absolutely go through the proper process. That's why there's one in place. Going through national newspapers, going on television, reporting these tittle-tattle and hearsay is not something that a sensible, serious government should be doing.
Yeah, I mean, Dominic Raab did vehemently, actually, on this channel, being interviewed by Olivia Utley, say that there were strong indications that there were activist elements of the civil service controlled or put forward by unions who were trying to bring down government ministers. Is this what we're about to see again here with Steve Barclay?
Well, it is. I think I was reading this morning that the head of the Civil Service Union had received the complaints himself and then obviously opted to talk about those claims again in national newspapers instead of forwarding them on to clearly the head of the Department of Health, Sir Chris Wormold, who, as he said this morning, has not had a single formal complaint. So there is something quite telling about those that are making the accusations, people that are backing those accusations that are all quite anti-government, I have to say, and not willing to go through the proper process because people might just be a little bit put out that a minister who's been in a very, very serious job, the Department of Health and previous jobs before that, might just want to hold you to account a bit more.
Look, the vast majority of people watching this show now, and myself included, have not had drastic first-hand experience of the civil service in a way that I dare say that maybe you have. Is there a bias in the civil service?
There is definitely a tension in the civil service, for sure, because, and that's understandable, you know, there are people, very, very hard-working people in the civil service who, whether it's at the behest of the ministers or previously, they can identify problems, they go and do the research, they lead projects. If it is the case that the minister at the time wants to take a different tact or doesn't agree or thinks that then of course, you know, you can take that quite personally, but you need to be able to work together with your minister. What some, it seems to me, take criticism a bit too harshly and personally and decide to describe that as bullying. That is not the way that the civil service should work. That's not the way that government can get the things that it needs to get done. And we need to make sure that, ministers decide, and they are the ones that are...
A lot of people think that Rishi Sunak should have had more of a backbone and stood up for Dominic Raab and kept him in post. I mean, if I was Steve Barclay now, I'd be very concerned.
Well, I think we've just got to wait and see. As I say, no formal complaints have been made. I mean, Dominic Raab, as I said before, he asked for the inquiry to take place himself, and he did say that he would resign if he was found to have fallen below the standard that was expected, and he's done that. And so, people can lose sleep over process, whether it's Dominic Raab that resigned or whether he was sacked. I mean, it's neither here nor there. He's no longer in position, and that's that. But I think if you're Steve Barclay, you should be absolutely committed and redouble your efforts and your determination to get the things that you want done, because that is what the government expects.
I take it you weren't bullied by Michael Gove?
Absolutely not. And I've never, and neither Steve Barclay, by the way, who actually, the only thing that I know about Steve Barclay was when he was Chief of Staff to Boris Johnson in Number 10, after the Partygate, he sent an email out to all special advisors and tried to create a totally different culture about bringing people in. His door was always open, and that went for anybody, whether you were in the catering team, cleaners at Number 10, everybody. The door was always open to Steve, and I think that's the man who I think he is, and I'm sorry that these allegations are out there, but I'm sure they'll be defended.
Charlie, thank you very much. Charlie Riley there, who's former special advisor to Michael Gove. Now, talking to Steve Barclay, he's involved in another one of the big stories today, actually. He's won his legal fight to declare the next nurses' strike unlawful. Is it a coincidence, possibly? Could this be a coincidence that he's also up for bullying? But anyway, I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political budgets.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
News.
Well, it's been a lively start to the show, so let's crack on, shall we? There's a big development today in the ongoing dispute between the government and the country's biggest nursing union. Strike action planned by the Royal College of Nursing for next Tuesday has been called off after a High Court judge ruled it would be unlawful. I'm going to whiz us over now to Paul Hawkins, GB News' national reporter, who's got the latest on all of this. Paul.
Yeah, hi Patrick. Really not that surprising a decision from Judge Justice Linden earlier today, given that the government lawyers were in court arguing for this injunction, saying that the 48-hour strike that the Royal College of Nurses were starting on Sunday at 8 p.m, lasting through to Tuesday, was in fact illegal because the second half of that dispute, the second 24 hours that stretched into Tuesday, went over the 6-month window that they are allowed to have once they balloted back in November, and the Royal College of Nursing weren't legally represented in court. There was a witness statement from Pat Cullen, the boss of the RCN, that was read out, that was submitted to the judge, but we sat in court and we just heard submissions from a lawyer representing the government. And just to read you some of the comments from Justice Judge Linden, he said that the union had acted with a high degree of unreasonableness. He said that the outcome was inevitable and that the union, instead of grasping the nettle and conceding, had instead forced the case to court. So he granted the injunction to the government to shorten the strike action that comes after this weekend, and he also ordered the union to pay the legal costs afterwards. Just behind me, outside court, we heard from Pat Cullen, the General Secretary of the Royal College of Nursing. This is what she had to say.
This is the darkest day in this dispute so far. Any government that would drag their nursing staff through the courts, they've won their legal battle today, but what this has led to is they've lost nursing and they've lost the public. They've taken the most trusted profession through the courts by the least trusted people.
Some people, Patrick, were asking, well, why did they call the strikes on these dates, given that half of the forthcoming industrial action would then stretch over the 6-month window? Pat Cullen was asked that and she said, look, we haven't made a mistake. This was our interpretation of when we could call the strike action. We disagree with the Health Secretary's interpretation and the judge's interpretation. Nevertheless, the strike action will have to be curtailed. It will have to finish by midnight on Monday. Pat Cullen saying that, look, this is only going to enrage our members even further. We could have strike action that now lasts all the way up to Christmas. The Health Secretary, Stephen Barclay, has welcomed, unsurprisingly, the decision today. He wants to work constructively with the RCN, he says, and he also wants to get around the table and talk about derogations for this strike action that's coming after the weekend. In other words, exemptions for staff that work in settings such as A&E, critical care, etc. At the moment, all RCN members are due to walk out from Sunday evening. Some people think that the reason that they decided to call these dates, cynics anyway, would say that this is to kind of stoke up the feeling within the RCN that the government is after them, given that the last time members were balloted on the current pay deal from the government, only 54% on a 61% turnout voted to reject the deal. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out with members when they are eventually balloted. In terms of strike action from other unions within the NHS, we know that Unison, the biggest union within the NHS, voted to accept the government's pay offer. Yesterday, midwives from the Royal College of Midwifery, they voted to accept the pay offer. And then today at lunchtime, physiotherapists, or at least physios who are members of the Chartered Society of Physiotherapy, in England, they've agreed to accept the government's latest pay offer. So it'll be interesting to see, given how those two unions have accepted the latest pay offer, see how that plays out with the Royal College of Nursing members when eventually they are balloted on action and indeed on that pay offer.
Lovely stuff. Paul, thank you very, very much. Paul Hawkins, our national reporter, giving you the very latest on the, well, lack of now, nurses' strike, isn't it? Loads more still to come between now and 4 o'clock. I think this is going to be a big one for you. We'll talk about jihadi gangs in prisons who are being accused of telling other inmates to convert to Islam or they'll be hurt. And what does this mean going forward? Because presumably they will be released out onto the streets one day. And there's news of big changes in the gambling industry. I will ask, how will they affect the millions of gambling punters in the UK? And actually, is this just over-regulation or public health and safety? But first, is your latest news headlines with Brianna Jones.
Thank you, Patrick. It's coming up to 34 minutes past 3, your top stories from the GB newsroom. Strike action planned by the Royal College of Nursing for the 2nd of May would be unlawful. A High Court judge has ruled the RCN's 6-month mandate for strike action will have lapsed by Tuesday. Protests by nurses took place outside court with signs saying silencing nurses is silencing patients. The Foreign Secretary says the government's continuing to assist British nationals in leaving Sudan and has urged them to make their way to the airport for evacuation as soon as possible. British forces are racing to rescue as many people as they can before the ceasefire ends tonight. More than 530 British citizens had been flown to safety as of yesterday evening, but the government says that number is rising. 16,000 have fled Sudan across the border into Egypt, including 14,000 Sudanese citizens. Schools in England are facing disruption today as tens of thousands of teachers belonging to the National Education Union have walked out over pay. Year 11 and Year 13 classes are understood to have been prioritised, with exams just weeks away. More strikes have also been announced for the summer term after union members rejected the government's pay offer. The government's unveiled the biggest shake-up of gambling laws in 15 years. It says it aims to redress the power imbalance between punters and operators. Gambling companies will have to step up checks to better protect even those unable to afford small losses. Plans also include maximum stakes for online slot machines of between £2 and £15. And some breaking news now. Talk show host Jerry Springer has died aged 79. According to TMZ, the British-American passed away at his home in Chicago. He was a prominent figure on TV networks in the 90s, hosting raucous debate shows. TV online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2470 and €1.1317. The price of gold is £1,593.18 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,847 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Gosh, well, I found that out exactly the same time as you, ladies and gentlemen. Jerry Springer, desperately sad news, isn't it? He's died at the age of 79. Apparently he's passed away peacefully in his Chicago home, and he was diagnosed with cancer just months ago. I mean, goodness gracious me, Jerry Springer's an absolute icon and a legend, isn't he? The Jerry Springer Show. We'll be playing you a couple of clips of that a bit later on. We'll be talking a bit more of that. But yeah, that breaking news that Jerry Springer sadly has passed away at the age of 79. More on that very, very shortly. But now, though, a new report published by the government's faith advisor Colin Bloom has claimed that radical prisoners are forcing fellow cellmates to convert to Islam or face violence. The report has also claimed that Sikh, Hindu and black extremism in prisons is thriving due to the Home Office's focus being predominantly on right-wing extremism. So, is the Home Office and prison system failing to protect prisoners from forms of radicalisation? And what does all of this really mean? Joining me now is security analyst Wazeek, thank you very much. I mean, I'm desperately concerned about all of this. I think the idea of jihadi gangs forcefully making people convert to Islam on pain of a beating or even worse is quite shocking stuff. How is this going to translate into wider society?
Well, I don't think it's actually as shocking as you might think it is. Jonathan Hall QC had actually raised this as a concern in his report only last year, 12 months ago, when he looked at jihadi gangs essentially controlling prisons. Now, what Colin Bloom seems to have done is heard of stories where prison staff are hearing the phrase convert or get hurt. And this has been used commonly by groups of gangs made predominantly of Muslim prisoners. And now, when you consider consider what happens when these prisoners are released, if they're not tackled within the prison system, is that they could be doing this sort of coercion and conversion in public and preventing people from actually exercising any sense of freedom of religion or belief or non-belief if they want, because they could be hurt as a result of not converting to Islam and becoming a Muslim.
I can't help but wonder whether or not there would be a different emphasis on this report if it had found out that there was gangs of neo-Nazis going around forcing people to convert to, you know, kind of far-right ideology. Now, look, I'm sure that there's a bit of that going around. I'm not completely ignorant to that fact. But when it looks at the predominantly Muslim radical Islamic gangs are forcing people to convert to Islam, I mean, it implies to me that maybe the prison service is a bit too afraid to do anything about it.
Well, there is certainly some evidence to suggest that that is the case. Jonathan Hawke, you see, found that actually political correctness was one of the reasons why prison staff weren't able to tackle some of these gangs, because the gangs were becoming very astute in being able to accuse prison staff of Islamophobia or discrimination and targeting them because they're Muslim, when actually that wasn't the case, and they were actually being treated equally, just like every other prisoner. And so this is one of the problems that we're facing in the prison system, is that spurious claims of Islamophobia are hampering prison staff to be able to deal with this effectively.
Indeed. Look, what needs to actually happen going forward, really, because, you know, there are a lot of vulnerable people in prison, and there are a lot of people who no doubt will be in fear of their life for being in there, and, you know, surely something needs to be done about this. And when it comes to the radical elements of it, whether it's people actually hell-bent on terrorism and actual out-and-out extremism, or whether it appears to be some violent gangs, I suppose. And I know there's a bit of a crossover in that Venn diagram, but there's a school of thought that says just isolating these people in their own separate wings would be better because it stops the poison spreading. What do you think?
Well, I think there's certainly evidence to suggest that separating the most extreme prisoners could actually have a positive impact in terms of the whole prison environment. But there are implications as a result of that, and that's one of the martyr effect, where people who are being isolated could be looked at as people to be looked up to and to be aspired to, so they can carry out the most extreme acts and then be placed into these prisons. So there is a balance in between that, but essentially what we need to do is we need to empower our prison staff to be able to deal with Islamist prisoners, even pro-Khalistan prisoners as well, because that emphasis seems to have been shifted away from some of the other elements, and to really increase that literacy in being able to deal with some of these prisoners who are able to use their religion and use political correctness as a way to further their aims.
Wazeek, thank you very much. Wazeek there, who is a security analyst, just reviewing the fact that now apparently radical jihadi gangs are being called anyway, are trying to convert people on pain of punishment within our prison system. Moving on now. So there is a grim warning today for Brits still stuck in Sudan. The ceasefire is due to end in just a few hours' time, so we'll be bringing you updates on all of that. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, and we are Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Just a reminder now of that breaking news that we brought you a few moments ago. The legendary talk show host Jerry Springer has sadly died at the age of 79. That's according to TMZ. The British-American passed away at his home in Chicago. Look, we'll bring you more on that and have a look back as well at some of Jerry Springer's best bits. I mean, he absolutely revolutionised, didn't he, the talk show industry, and lots of people kind of base their future programmes on him a bit. And can I just say, fabulous entertainment as well throughout the course of it. What an absolute icon and institution Jerry Springer really was. And sad news, that, isn't it, of his passing at the age of 79. And I promise you, desperately trying to dig out some of Jerry Springer's best bits for all of our entertainment. But there we go. Right, now, though, to the latest on the government's attempts to get British nationals out of Sudan. And there's a grim warning from the Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly. He says the evacuation efforts will be potentially impossible once a ceasefire ends. A total of 536 people have flown out of Sudan on 6 flights so far. Now, it's thought that up to 4,000 Brits were in the country when the evacuation started. I'm joined now by GB News' Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, it's bad news for people still stuck in Sudan, basically.
Yes, it is. And, of course, from midnight tonight, local time, there is going to be an end, we think, to the ceasefire. There are talks of sorts underway to see if they can extend the ceasefire. But if they can't, I think it's likely the British government's advice to UK citizens who are still in Sudan is probably to shelter in place rather than risk a journey to that airfield to get out. Because certainly that was the British government policy before then, Patrick, was to not to try to make the journey, even though Germany and some other countries encouraged their citizens to try to get out, even though the fighting was ongoing.
Yeah, and on that, the British government has copped it a little bit. I mean, is it a fair comparison to say that we have done less than France and Germany? I mean, did we have just more people to get out? What's the reality?
Well, we have got more people to get out, much more than many other countries who probably number in the hundreds in terms of the nationals that they have. We've got, as you just mentioned, up to 4,000 British nationals in the country, and I think it is unfair. We took a different approach, not necessarily a slower approach, but an approach that was aimed at not putting British nationals under a greater risk, trying to limit the risk that they are facing. Of course, the bigger question, if this war does start raging again, where are these displaced people going to end up? We know that 16,000 people have crossed the border into Egypt. Thousands more are making their way to other border crossings to neighbouring countries. And of course, and the Home Secretary has acknowledged this as well, some of those will end up heading into Europe and coming to the northwest corner of France with a view to getting on these boats and across the English Channel. We know this because already, with regard to the numbers who cross the Channel, the Sudanese are in the top 10 of nations who are represented on these small boats. This morning, again, you can see these pictures are from Dungeness on the Kent coast, another group of people who have been taken off small boats and then put on board the lifeboats and taken to Dungeness, brought up the shingle beach there, Patrick. And this year, people might be interested to know that already, just 3 months really into the year in terms of how we measure these things, 144 Sudanese nationals were on these small boats. So it is absolutely inevitable that we will continue to see Sudanese on the boats, but probably in greater numbers if some of those who have left Sudan make their way over to Europe and then north to northern France.
Mark, thank you very, very much. Mark White, our Home and Security Editor, bringing you up to date with everything that's been going on in Sudan. Now, well, the long-awaited government gambling white paper was outlined by Culture Secretary Lucy Fraser in the House of Commons earlier today. So the proposals on regulation will, quote, help redress the power imbalance between punters and operators while preventing addiction. And she also says that the changes will better protect even those unable to afford small losses. Anything to do with gambling is always controversial because a lot of people enjoy it. I think it's possibly a little bit like booze, isn't it? The vast majority of people drink very responsibly, if not maybe slightly too much, and enjoy themselves while they do it. But there are people with massive problems, and potentially the same is likely with gambling, isn't it? So is this over-regulation and people reaching into people's lives and trying to stop them from just having a good time, or actually is it public health and safety? Let's now speak to Justin Larkham, who's a recovered gambling addict and author of the book Tales I Lose. Thank you very much. Great to chat to you. How do you respond to the government's approach here, which is essentially to introduce, well, more regulation, tighter controls?
Well, I'm first of all delighted to hear that there is going to be more control. I think the regulation dating back to 2005, nearly 20 years ago, when the last time it was looked at, needed reform. And it needs reform because the way that we gamble now is very, very different. Everything really now is done on the smartphones. And we needed to bring the regulation into the digital age, really.
I mean, I'm just having a look at some of the detail on this now, and some of the conditions could be applied to even £2 limits on online slot machines. I mean, is this really necessary?
Well, if you look at some of the figures, which are quite tragic, in the 3 years that it's taken for this review, 1,000 people will have taken their own lives because of gambling. And I think what needs to happen is we need to see it as a public health issue, allowing people who gamble responsibly, and most people do. You're absolutely right. Most people just have a harmless flutter and it's a bit of fun. But there is 2.2% of all the adults that gamble in the UK, and because it's such a high number of people that do gamble, that's a big number, have real problems and their lives are messed up. If you are a problem gambler, you are 25% more likely to take your own life. 10% of every suicide in the UK is gambling related. And the harm that causes to children and loved ones and family is quite horrific. So I think the concept, really, the balance needs to be found between allowing those people who want to have a bet. I'm not anti-gambling at all. I lost everything through gambling in 3 years. Could you
tell me a bit about that, if you don't mind? Would you mind? Would you mind if you're all right with it? You're telling me a little bit about where gambling took you personally.
I'd had a great career in the army, and I was a thrill seeker, I have to admit. I went to work in the city, had a successful career in finance, and then a number of things happened in my life. My 11-month-old son had an epileptic fit and stopped breathing in my arms. I think the trauma of that set me off, and I saw a £5 free bet advertised, and without knowing it, without thinking about it, I got my laptop and I won. And I never told my wife about that, and 3 years later, I had lost £750,000. I'd lost my home. I'd lost my job. My wife, her ex-wife, had left with the children. She was right to do that. She was protecting them. I had 3 bin liners of stuff, £75,000 worth of debt, and that was it. Even the Sword of Honour I'd won at Sandhurst for graduating top of my intake, I sold. I was thinking suicidal thoughts and had a choice.
Well, look, thank you very much for coming on and being brave enough to talk out about it. I know there are a lot of people out there who will be suffering quite possibly in a very similar way to you, who will not be able to talk about it or feel the need to talk about it. So thank you very, very much. It's Justin Larkham there, who is a survivor of the gambling addiction world. I think it is a very tough one to get right, isn't it, when it comes to things like this over-regulation, because gambling does bring a lot of joy to a lot of people. And also, as well, you know, when you look at it, the argument against this stuff would be that it's a slippery slope. And so do you shorten the amount of time that pubs are open? Do you, ban the amount of booze that people could buy at supermarkets and things? Does it manage to curtail its way into other elements of our lives as well? How long will it be before there's a limit on the amount of sugary sweets that you can buy? So I can very much see both sides of this. And I think for the vast majority of people out there who gamble, I must say I'm not one of them, but for the vast majority of people out there who do gamble, it will not be a problem in their life. They might look at this now and think, why is the government reaching into it? But then we also look at some of the stark figures that our friend there outlined for us, don't you? And you think, well, maybe, just maybe, if it saves lives, it is the right thing to do. I've got some breaking news for you now, though, and it is sad news. A murder investigation has been launched into the death of a pregnant teacher, Morel Sturrock, in Glasgow. Officers are searching for her fiancé, David Yates. Morel's body was found on Tuesday morning. I'll read that one more time for you. This is the breaking news that has just come through to us now, which is that a murder investigation has been launched into the death of pregnant teacher Morel Sturrock in Glasgow. Officers are searching for her fiancé, David Yates. Morel's body was found on Tuesday morning. So that is the breaking news for you now. Right, and yeah, just a little reminder as well as there's some other sad news. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, it's non-stop sad news here at the moment, but legendary talk show host Jerry Springer has passed away at the age of 79. I'm going to have more reaction on this for you very, very shortly. Jerry Springer, of course, an absolute icon and a legend of the game, but I'm going to finish this show with a bit of you. GB Views at gbnews.uk, or this hour of the show, I should say. A lot of emails flooding into a topic that we're going to return to at the top of the next hour, which is on Britain now, officially, according to a study, being one of the least racist countries in the world. And I did speak to an individual on this who seemed to not believe the study, which I do find fascinating because people are very quick to jump on other studies that appear to show that Britain is indeed a hotbed and a cesspit of racism. Look, I've got an email here from Jackie. It says racism, in Jackie's view, has nothing to do with people coming over here at all. She doesn't think that she's a racist, but she thinks that we cannot going on with this level of influx of people, and it's an economic aspect of this for Jackie. Just another one as well for another top story I'll also be returning to at the top of the next hour, which is on whether or not Steve Barclay, our health secretary, is indeed a bully. They've come for Raab. Are they coming now for Barclay? Is it a coincidence that bullying allegations have been levelled at him as the nurses' strike has just been blocked? For goodness sake, these people are running the country, not working at McDonald's. We're going to be left with a bunch of snowflakes, and that is from Rain. There we go. Loads more coming your way. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope?
It's very much so.
And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very good afternoon, everybody. It's just gone 4 p.m. You're with Patrick Christys on GB News. I've got loads for you, actually. Very sad news at the top. Jerry Springer has sadly passed away at the age of 79. The talk show legend and icon. We will be paying tribute to him with some of his best bits as well. I mean, he really changed the game, didn't he? In other news as well, yes, Britain apparently is officially now not racist, confirming something I think a lot of us did already know. But a new study has put us amongst the least racist countries in the world. So hopefully we can all just move on from that now. In other news, Steve Barclay as well, yes, our health secretary. Now, is he a bully? Because the civil service appeared to be at it again. They came for Rob, they got Rob. They're now coming for Barclay. I mean, is this just the old snowflakes out in force again because they disagree with him? Coincidence? I think not. But it comes on the same day that the nurses' strike was legally blocked. We're also going to be doing a little bit of this today as well, aren't we? Are our PCs 2 PCs? Well, Braverman seems to think that political correctness is getting in way of them enforcing the law, especially when it comes to Extinction Rebellion, Just Stop Oil, and even rumblings that the police force or elements of it might actually agree with that cause, and that is stopping them from preventing it. But there we go. And yes, elsewhere as well, do they share our values? Now, this is interesting, especially in light of what we're going to be talking about earlier on as well, which is about whether or not Britain is a racist country. So Suella Braverman is saying that a lot of people coming across the channel don't share our values, and that could well end up being a problem for us. How do you feel about all of that? Yeah, loads. Busy show. Stay tuned. Well, gbviews at gbnews.uk is that email address. A lot to get your teeth stuck into there. We'll be talking about Britain not being racist at the top. Do you agree with that finding or do you disagree with it? gbviews at gbnews.uk. Right now, though, headlines with Polly.
Patrick, thank you. Good afternoon to you. The top story on GB News today. Strike action planned by the Royal College of Nursing for the 2nd of May would be unlawful. A High Court judge has ruled today the RCN's 6-month mandate for strike action will have lapsed by Tuesday. Protests by nurses have been taking place outside the court with signs held up saying silencing nurses is silencing patients. And the RCN's General Secretary, Pat Cullen, says the government's lost the trust of nurses and the public.
This is the darkest day in this dispute so far. Any government that would drag their nursing staff through the courts, they've won their legal battle today, but what this has led to is they've lost nursing and they've lost the public. They've taken the most trusted profession through the courts by the least trusted people.
Well, the Labour leader Keir Starmer is urging the government to resolve the pay dispute quickly.
The nurses don't want to be on strike. They want a government that's negotiating and talking to them, not taking them to court. I think most people are scratching their head and saying, instead of going to court, just get on with resolving the underlying issues. They've created the conditions that have put huge pressure on people because the economy hasn't worked for over a decade now. Many people have had stagnant wages, their living standards have gone down, not up. So the government bears a heavy responsibility, and I think most people would say, get on with it, get round the table and resolve these issues.
Now, the Foreign Secretary says the government's continuing to assist British nationals in leaving Sudan and has urged them to make their own way to the airport for evacuation as soon as possible. British forces are racing to rescue as many people as they can before the ceasefire comes to an end tonight. More than 530 British citizens have been flown to safety as of yesterday evening, but the government says that number is rising. 16,000 people have fled Sudan across the border into Egypt so far, including 14,000 Sudanese citizens. Speaking in the House of Commons today, James Cleverly said the UK was also looking into assisting countries with no diplomatic presence in the country.
For those on the ground, as you would expect, we are prioritising those in greatest need through allocating seats based on vulnerability, starting with families with children, the elderly, the disabled, or people with documented medical conditions. We have been notifying British nationals registered with us about the evacuation flights, as well as announcing them through our travel advice and also through organic social media networks of British nationals in Sudan.
Foreign Secretary James Cleverly there. Now, the government has tabled Northern Ireland's budget for the next financial year, and while there is still no sitting devolved government, Westminster has given Stormont extra time to repay a £300 million advance. Let's take you live now to Dougie Beattie, who's in Belfast for us. Dougie, how has this been received politically?
Well, real disappointment and concern amongst local politicians. The block grant that is given to Northern Ireland is basically flatlined. It stays exactly the same, and half of that has been handed to health. And with the cost of living and inflation crisis, that works out about a 10% cut right across the board. And with no local government in Northern Ireland, Chris Heaton-Harris is now running a indirect rule government with civil servants having to make those very hard choices, and they will be open to judicial reviews.
Dougie Beattie for the moment. Thanks very much indeed. Now, the government's unveiled the biggest shake-up of gambling laws in 15 years. It says it aims to redress the power imbalance between punters and operators. Checks to better protect even those unable to afford small losses are among the plans, as well as maximum stakes for online slot machines. Culture Secretary Lucy Fraser says it'll also help prevent addiction to gambling. Schools in England are facing disruption today as tens of thousands of teachers have gone on strike. National Education Union members have walked out over pay. Year 11 and Year 13 classes are being prioritised, with exams just weeks away. And more strikes have been announced for the summer term after union members rejected the government's pay offer. Joint General Secretary of the NEU, Mary Bousted, says teachers are experiencing hardship.
We've got teachers who are skipping meals, we've got teachers not heating their homes, we've got teachers taking on second jobs when they already work the most unpaid overtime of all professions. That's the reality of what teachers are facing, and that is what the government has to face, that reality, if we want a well-educated nation and if we want the education that our children deserve.
The ASLEF union has announced its train drivers will stage 3 new strikes in their long-running dispute over pay. 2 of the walkouts will happen in May and 1 will take place on the 3rd of June, the day of the FA Cup final. It's after the union rejected a 4% pay offer. Now, the sad news we've received within the last half an hour here at GB News. The talk show host Jerry Springer has died at the age of 79. The British-American passed away peacefully, we're told, at his home in Chicago. He was a prominent figure on American TV networks for nearly 3 decades, best known for showcasing and analysing problems faced by some dysfunctional families on his show. Jerry Springer, who's died at the age of 79. Just one little more bit of breaking news to bring you here from GB News Centre. A murder investigation, we understand, has been launched into the death of the pregnant teacher Morel Sturrock in Glasgow. Police in Glasgow are now searching for her fiancé David Yates. We'll keep you updated on that story when we have more information. That's all from me. I'm back in half an hour.
Well, welcome back, everybody. So we'll bring you more on that reaction to the sad news about Jerry Springer's sad passing very, very shortly. But we're going in with our top story at the moment, and that is a recent study has undermined all the talk that racism is rampant across the United Kingdom. In fact, it claims that we live in one of the least racist countries in the world. A survey of 24 nations found that just 2% of Brits wouldn't want to have someone of a different race as their neighbour. And when it comes to living alongside an immigrant or foreign worker, the figure is only 5%. Now, in both categories, the UK is less racist than the United States, France and Italy, and in fact loads of other countries, which I will rattle off for you very, very shortly. But I am joined now by senior social worker and political activist Joseph David. Thank you very, very much for joining me. Now, look, how do you respond to the results of this survey that Britain now apparently is, well, officially, really, one of the least racist countries in the world?
Well, I think what this shows is that we in Great Britain have built a pluralist, multiracial nation to be proud of. I think this study was welcome reading because it's very much in line with the experiences that I've had on the street as a member of a minority community. And it's the fact that race tends not to come into it for most people.
Yeah, exactly. Do you think this undermines people who appear to be intent on seeing racism absolutely everywhere, even unconsciously?
Yes, but what I would say is that if you really are intent on finding it, if you look hard enough, you will find it. And there are tools such as intersectionality that will help you to find vulnerability and bigotry wherever you look. So whilst this is, as I said, very welcome reading, the people who have a self-deprecating attitude towards the United Kingdom and towards race relations, I fear maybe won't see it.
Indeed. I'm just going to rattle off some of the countries who, and there's a lot of them, who scored more highly in the old racism charts than we did. So Iran, Russia, Japan, China, Greece, Morocco, South Korea, Egypt, Poland, Italy, the Philippines, Indonesia, Mexico, Spain, Nigeria, France, Australia, Canada, the United States and Norway. And people were asked whether or not they would like to live next door to an immigrant or foreign worker or people of a different race. And on both of those, Britain did phenomenally well. And I just wonder why you think that is, because you would be forgiven, I think, if you open the pages of The Guardian on a daily basis, for example, to assume that you could almost flip that list on its head.
Indeed. Britain is a country where minority inclusion and social integration is done to an extent that I think other countries could really learn from. And it's the fact that somebody from a minority community can achieve high office, irrespective of their race or religion, that means that in public life, people are interacting with people from all races every single day. And this is almost cyclical. People interact more with those from minority communities every day, and this means that they're more able to welcome them into their communities. And it's the fact that Britain is truly a welcoming pluralist country that means that people are more able to welcome those with differences into our society.
And it flies in the face of a UN working group that claimed that ethnic minorities in Britain are living in fear as a result of systemic racism. It's that word systemic, isn't it, I think? And that the UK is not close to being a racially just society. I do have to ask you, though, I mean, in light of the things that you've just said there, which portrays, along with this study, that Britain is indeed a welcoming, frankly, non-racist country, we are seeing issues of anti-Semitism raise its head, aren't we? And Diane Abbott is a notable example recently. I mean, how do you maybe marry up ideas of anti-Semitism potentially being rife in the country with also this study and your views on that?
Well, I think we do need to differentiate between systemic racism and racist opinions that are held by individuals. I think it's fairly obvious that we live in a country where both members of the public and those within institutions will do almost anything so as not to be seen as racist. They'll do almost anything to be inclusive. So I think claims of systemic racism are probably quite laughable, whereas we need to be aware of the fact that racism exists within communities in the country and not be naive to it, which is why I would say that people aren't living in fear, people are more vigilant.
And just finally with you, if that's all right, do you think the uncomfortable truth is that potentially some people have maybe a bit of a chip on their shoulder or maybe are very, very too keen to point out things that they see as just perceived racism?
Yes, I was talking before about a self-deprecating culture that we have in the country, and it's almost as if you don't try and find an area of bigotry in the country. People will look at you as if you have an ulterior motive, whereas in actual fact, if you talk to people on the street, their experiences are very different.
Yosif, thank you very much. Great to chat. Yosif David, there, senior social worker and political activist. Now, yes, that big news that broke whilst we were live on air just a few moments ago. Jerry Springer, the TV host who changed the talk show forever, has died at the age of 79. So his show, which ran for 27 seasons, pioneered inviting everyday people on as guests and confronting them with people that they'd betrayed, most often their own partners, for example. Television was his second career, though. He was previously a politician and served as mayor of Cincinnati. And although he was no fan of another reality TV star turned politician.
I'd like to formally apologize. I've ruined the culture. No, my show is a circus. I mean, that's all it is. It's stupid, but it's been around for 27 years now. And so I never view it as anything more than an a show about outrageous behavior. But we don't deal with serious issues. In other words, it's about dating. People get angry, but then tomorrow they're dating someone else. You know, and Trump is president, he's the president, so there you go. But I never thought that someone on my show should be a president. So in other words, they should be two separate things. And, but, for people that are unhappy, and look, he's our president, so I'll grant him that respect, but it's not someone I wanted to be president. I don't like his policies. And so to the rest of the world, I simply say, just pretend we're on a 4-year break. So it's like when you had a substitute teacher. So, go wild for 4 years, but we'll fix it.
I mean, can anyone else see the slight irony there of a man getting on his high horse about values, etc.? As much of a legend as Jerry Springer is, whilst also simultaneously inviting people on their show to fight each other and expose some of the most personal aspects of their lives in front of a crowd and an audience of millions. But there we go. Joining me now is entertainment correspondent Rebecca Twomey. Rebecca, look, Jerry Springer absolutely changed the game, didn't he? Just unbelievable, the scenes. I didn't think that TV would ever really be like that, and quite arguably it shouldn't be going forward. But, I mean, it was absolute out-and-out entertainment, wasn't it?
Oh, what a shame that we've lost another great entertainment star this week, because he really did redefine reality TV. This was back in the 90s and the early noughties. This was when we didn't have that much, sort of as many options as we do now for TV. So he really was a massive star. It was also the dawn of reality TV and, everyday people, civilians, actually getting their 15 minutes of fame. He did actually provide a platform, which obviously we see rolled out now and all the time with the reality TV. But one of the things that Jerry Springer did is that he did actually, while there was a pantomime, he called his show Escapism Entertainment. He was never under any illusion of what the show was. But actually, deep down, as a former politician, he did actually care about people. Yes, there was the spectacles and the chants of Go Jerry, which we'll all remember. But really, essentially, do you remember his final thought at the end of each show? He tried to give people some sort of moral lesson. I know we can all say it was a bit tongue-in-cheek, but actually deep down he did care, and he did provide a platform for people that didn't always necessarily air their grievances. But I mean, some of them were ludicrous and ridiculous. I mean, he had to hire a security guard for his shows, and that's where we see, the likes of, the now axed Jeremy Kyle show as well. Jerry Springer did really sort of start things off in this genre, and really, back in the day, there were more viewers of Jerry Springer than Oprah Winfrey, and obviously that is hugely successful in the US, and it wasn't without controversy though, that show.
No, look, absolutely. I mean, I'm reading here that at one point, TV Guide ranked it number 1 on a list of worst shows in the history of television. But in a way, I think that's a good thing, because they were probably getting on their high horse about it being trashy, which it was. But what matters? Yeah. Ratings. And it was getting absolutely loads of them, millions of them. Yeah. Some of the content I actually can't repeat, obviously. But things about people getting into relationships, even with their own siblings, at one point, I'm paraphrasing massively here because the titles of Jerry Springer's shows are not fit for broadcast. Hooking Up With My Therapist is one that I can just about repeat here, which is fine. 4,000 broadcast episodes. And, I mean, he is just the definition, really, of an international household name, isn't he?
Yeah, he was a huge success, and there's nothing wrong. He called it escapism entertainment, and I think I always say that entertainment does have that purpose of escapism. The problem with TV is we're very judgmental, but really, when we're sitting on our sofas worrying about fuel prices and everything else, all the kind of negativity that's going on, cost of living crisis, sometimes you want to turn on the TV and think, well, actually, someone's got it a lot worse than I have. And this was really what Jerry Springer's show did. When you see someone going through something, you think, goodness, thank the Lord that I'm not actually in their position. And that's what actually makes people feel good. I know we like to be very judgmental of certain demographics, but this was a show that actually people loved. They absolutely adored this show. And like I said, there wasn't as much choice, so it was hugely popular. It was actually at some point banned in the UK from the times that school children would watch it because of the themes, and that was quite controversial. If you think now what's available on Instagram and the mad kind of self-proclaimed therapist on Instagram giving advice, when you have got someone that has had life experience, that was a politician, that does care about people giving advice, I think actually it's quite innocent now when you compare it to what we've got today.
100%. And actually, so many people in TV owe their careers to Jerry Springer. He was an absolute trailblazer. I'm not trying to dress this up as something that it wasn't. It was unashamedly, you used the word escapism there. Yeah, all right, I mean, trash will be another word for it, but that was brilliant. I love a bit of trash every now and again. I think it's fantastic stuff. And so many people owe their careers to him because they kind of mirrored a bit of a format, toned it down a little bit, or in some cases, didn't. And I've got to be honest with you, Rebecca, if you brought that show back exactly as it was in the, I'm looking here, was it late 80s, 90s, I think it was, it would absolutely bang again, wouldn't it?
Do you know what? I think it would, because it's sort of very tongue-in-cheek. It's not trying to be anything it's not. And I think that's the popularity we know as viewers when we're trying to be manipulated or duped. Like you said, if you want to call it trash, or I prefer the term escapism entertainment, which is what Springer called it, I think we'd still be absolutely hooked because people are fascinating. I think we just love seeing people in different situations air things, how we'd love to do it, but we'd never dream of doing it.
No. Well, I'm sorry, if somebody tells me that I'm about to watch, someone confront one of their many lovers who has just found out about all of their other lovers and they happen to live in a trailer park somewhere outside of North Carolina, I am going to hang on and watch that over the break, and that is part of the joys of it. Look, thank you very much, Rebecca. Rebecca Tomey there is entertainment correspondent. Of course, we're adding to the very sad news that Jerry Springer has passed away at the age of 79. An absolute institution. I am desperate, I can assure you, ladies and gentlemen, to try to have some footage of his best bits on the telly, because it's about time. If we ever need an excuse to get that stuff back on TV, it is now, of course, so there we go. Right, now, loads more on that story throughout the course of the show. But to more moaning from the civil service. Yes, after getting rid of Dominic Raab, it looks like they're now out to get Steve Barclay. It's reported that Barclay is the subject of informal complaints about his behaviour. Downing Street has said that ministers must be able to robustly challenge civil servants, and Foreign Secretary James Cleverly has defended Barclay and said that the Health Secretary is absolutely not a bully. But, of course, in light of Dominic Raab, the report there that meant that despite the fact that he didn't particularly shout or swear at anyone, and indeed one person that he reprimanded, didn't even demote, by the way, had, for all intents and purposes, essentially siphoned off a bit of our sovereign territory to the Spanish, and that was enough to get you sacked or resigned anyway, from a position, a very senior job. I just wonder whether or not Steve Barclay is, bricking it. Anyway, with me now is political commentator Suzanne Evans. Suzanne, thank you very much for joining me. I mean, this cannot be a coincidence, can it, that the nurses and a lot of people on the left don't particularly like Steve Barclay and his policy when it comes to a pay rise for them, and now all of a sudden he's a raging bully, is he?
No, he isn't, absolutely not. I mean, I don't know Steve well, but I have met him. In fact, funnily enough, the first time I met Steve was when I was attempting to become a parliamentary candidate for the Conservative Party, and he interviewed me. And I found him absolutely charming, terribly engaging. He certainly wasn't a bully in that interview, when arguably you could say he should have been a bit of a bully to test people out and see how well they'd perform under pressure. But he was absolutely lovely. And I think we've got a situation now, it's not so much anymore, I think, ministers doing the bullying as the civil servants bullying the ministers. Now, perhaps they were emboldened by the report into Dominic Raab last week, which forced him to resign, even though on the face of it, his peccadillos didn't seem to be very great at all. That he was pretty much exonerated of more or less every claim bar two against him. And the report, you look at it, all he was trying to do, I think, was trying to get people to do their best work and calling them out when they didn't do their best work. Now, I wonder if people in the health service, and as you said, Patrick, then the NHS isn't known for its right-wing tendencies, its conservative tendencies, let's put it that way. I think we've seen several conservative health ministers out of a job through some kind of not terribly exciting scandal, whereas Labour ministers, when there's been a Labour government, in my recollection, the health service can go to hell in a handcart, and they seem to be quite safe in their jobs. So I suspect there were people who were emboldened by that report into Dominic Raab last week and have now decided that they'd like to bring down another, in their view, unpopular Conservative minister.
What do we do, Suzanne? Do you have to say a phrase that you're not really supposed to anymore, which is just man up?
It's a good phrase, and I mean sometimes that's what is called for, and maybe that's the kind of approach that Steve Barclay took with the health service and the civil service. It's not performing well. We've got waiting lists at a record high. We've got junior doctors and nurses holding the country to ransom. I mean, let's not forget that the nurses have rejected a 5% pay rise against the advice of their own union, the Royal College of Nursing. It is increasingly beginning to look like they're trying to bring down a government rather than stand up for their own rights. And I'm sure we can all recall pictures of the picket lines outside hospitals, which don't so much say, fair pay for a fair day's work, but down with the Tories.
Yeah, well, I suppose it is that implication, isn't it? There's political motivation when it comes to all of this. Suzanne, thank you very, very much. Great to have you on the show. Oh, wait, no, actually, while I've got you, sorry, I'm getting something in my ear now. In light of the sad news of Jerry Springer's passing at the age of 79, I am reliably informed, Suzanne, that you met Jerry Springer. Is that right?
I have, that's right. We were actually on the same TV programme together. It was a programme presented by Andrew Neil called This Week on the Beeb, and he was one of the guests. And I have to say, you might think his show was trash, but my goodness, Jerry Springer was anything but trash. He was what you might call a consummate politician, charming, intelligent, engaging, very happily posing for photographs. I'll put it on my Twitter feed later, and if I can fish it out of the archives. Absolutely lovely man. Changed the face of, I think, television, that kind of probing into people's lives, that kind of invasive TV that you had to love to hate, but you loved it too.
Yeah, you couldn't take your eyes off it. It was all action, and I absolutely loved it. I have seen some things on Jerry Springer's show that I've never seen anywhere else, and I very much doubt I ever will. Suzanne, thank you.
And you
Suzanne
never want to see again.
You'll never see again, yeah, although I am desperately trying to pitch the idea of replicating that show right here on GB News with limited success, it must be said. Suzanne, thank you. Suzanne Evans, there, political commentator, joining us there. Right, OK, so moving on. A police officer has warned a motorist that if he disrupted Just Stop Oil protests, he will be guilty of assault. Whose side are these people on? Is Suella Braverman right to say that our PCs are too PC? I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Dubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, everybody. Loads more still to go between now and 5 o'clock. Suella Braverman says that small boat migrants possess values which are at odds with our country. Do you think that she's right? And is that, frankly, a ticking time bomb? Do you think that people coming across the channel, many of them, might have values which are different to the values that we try to uphold in this country? And if so, is that a problem? I'm going to be having a big chat about that when I'm back. And are police officers siding with Just Stop Oil protesters and threatening to arrest motorists? Whose side are they on? Are our PCs too PC? But first, before we get stuck into all of that, is the headlines with Polly.
Patrick, thank you. The top stories this evening. The Foreign Secretary says the government is continuing to assist British nationals in leaving Sudan in northeast Africa, urging them to make their way to the airport for evacuation as soon as possible. British forces are currently racing to rescue as many people as they can before the ceasefire ends tonight. And James cleverly says no one can predict the situation on the ground after that. More than 530 British citizens have been flown to safety as of yesterday evening. 16,000, though, have fled Sudan across the border into Egypt, including 14,000 Sudanese. Here, strike action planned by the Royal College of Nursing for the 2nd of May would be unlawful. A High Court judge has ruled today the RCN's 6-month mandate for strike action will have lapsed by Tuesday. Protests by nurses took place outside the court with signs saying silencing nurses is silencing patients. And a murder investigation has been launched into the death of a pregnant teacher in Glasgow. Morel Sturrock was found dead on Tuesday morning. She had been 29 weeks pregnant. Her baby didn't survive. There's a manhunt underway for her fiancé, David Yates. His car was found at Mugdock Country Park, where police are now focusing their search. And the government has unveiled the biggest shake-up of gambling laws in 15 years. It says it aims to redress the power imbalance between punters and operators. Gambling companies will have to step up checks to better protect even those unable to afford small losses. Plans also include maximum stakes for online slot machines of between £2 and £15. As you've been hearing, the US talk show host Jerry Springer has died at the age of 79. He was a prominent figure on TV networks for nearly 3 decades in America, best known for showcasing everyday family dramas on his show. Television was his second career. He was previously a politician and served as mayor of Cincinnati. The British American passed away peacefully at his home in Chicago. You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News.
Well, now to the latest in Suella Braverman's war on woke policing. Now, this time she's asserted that the police seem to be backing the Just Stop Oil protesters. Now, the activists have been causing disruption, obviously, throughout the streets of London over the past week, bringing traffic to a standstill and angering motorists. Now, the Home Secretary has also criticised forces for engaging with debates on contested social issues. The implication here is that the police force in some way supports what Just Stop Oil are doing, or certainly is not doing enough to protect the desires and the lives, really, of, well, let's be honest with you, ordinary working people. And yesterday I did play you a clip of what appeared to be a chap with a van, so man with van, getting out of it, ripping a protester's banner down and saying, look, I need to get to work, I really need to get to work, and then what looked like being surrounded by several police officers who said that he might be done for assault for doing that. And I find that, well, quite maddening, really. Joining me now is former Met Police officer Chris Ops. Chris, thank you very much. Are the police more on the side of Just Stop Oil than your ordinary working man and woman?
I think she has really upset police officers with that statement. If she gave them the tools, they'd be able to do the job properly. They've got no brief for Just Stop Oil. Problem they've got is, of course, is legislation. Supreme Court. They have decreed that a certain amount of disruption can be caused by protests because of human rights, Articles 11 and 12. And some people got acquitted for that reason. So that set a precedent. If you protest, you can cause a certain amount of disruption. And then, of course, with slow marching, the police specifically requested that that be brought into law, to become an Act of Parliament. The government tried it. You can't slow march or you'll be arrested. It's a specific offence, and it was thrown out by the House of Lords. So the police, to a certain extent, have got their hands tied. As for potentially preventing a motorist from assaulting a JSO protester, police have got every sympathy with their frustrations, but they can't stand by. If they stood by and something happened and somebody got hurt, that officer or officers will be facing disciplinary proceedings and could end up in court for misconduct in public office.
Yeah, it's a very tricky one. I have got a little clip now of something that was doing the rounds on social media earlier on. I'm just going to talk you through it, really. So it's man with van pulling up, confronted by a barrier of Just Stop Oil, rips the poster, the banner out of their hands and goes to dash it on the side of the road. He's still got it in his hand. Then one police officer, two police officers, they get in touch. They're basically saying, look, you need to stop this. He's saying, I've got to get to work. I've got to get to work. Please let me get to work. The police officers surrounding him. As this clip plays on as well, another couple of police officers get involved as well. And I've got to put it to you, Chris, that the ordinary person watching this now, I think, would have a lot of sympathy for the idea, just the way that it looks, which is the police are going to do more about a man ripping a banner out of some annoying people's hands than they are about the annoying people.
Well, I've just explained the reasons why their hands are tied. And if they didn't intervene there and something had happened, and that motorist perhaps got really upset and tried dragging somebody along the floor and they got quite badly hurt, or their clothes got damaged, and the police did nothing, those police officers... So what they're trying to do, I think they've got every police officer I talk to on these protests, and I go to quite a few of them, haven't been able to keep up with Just Stop Oil. I was out observing Extinction Rebellion over those 4 days.
Yeah.
But every police officer can sympathise and empathise with the frustrations felt by motorists. But
and their hands are tied, is what you're saying, and especially when people find out as well that, you know, legislation that probably would have stopped what we're currently seeing now, which is this slow walking, was actually knocked back by the House of Lords, and maybe people should take it up with them as opposed to the police. And I do feel very sorry for the police on this, because they are very much at the front line of it, and they're the visible face of public anger. I have incredible sympathy. I would be the same if I was in my car trying to get to work, or there was disruption to my day. I mean, good grief, work is the least of it. Can you imagine if you had a relative having a stroke in the back of your car or something, the worst case scenario stuff, your wife in labour or whatever? I would be absolutely livid with police for not doing anything about it. But there's not really a lot they can do. Let's change the law right here on this show. What laws do we need?
Well, you need basically, if there's going to be an offence of obstructing the highway, let's make it with some penalties, and let's take away the Human Rights Act, because as long as that Human Rights Act is there, and obviously that's controversial if you do remove it, Articles 10 and 11, then this is going to be the case. And of course, even if police make arrests, they've then got to get it past the Crown Prosecution Service. And that in itself could be problematic if they turn around and say, well, I'm sorry, Articles 10 and 11 trump what you've just tried to do, or what you've done in arresting that particular individual. So it is, but they have, having said that, previous Just Stop Oil protests, police have arrested more than 500 of those protesters. But now you've got this precedent's been set legally, which is what the Commissioner pointed out in his confrontation that he had yesterday. You know the law, our hands are tied. This morning, as I understand it, they have moved JSO protesters. They've invoked a part of the Public Order Act that says if it's really serious disruption, we can act. And they've actually moved them, and JSO complied and got out of the road when they were threatened with arrest.
All right, look, thank you very much, Chris. Great stuff there. Chris Hobbs there, who is indeed a former Met police officer. And on that one, I've got to be honest with you, I just think Suella Braverman maybe has got that one wrong, because whilst we all agree, we would all, well, say we all, I certainly, would like police to, you know, come in swinging and get rid of these people. What do we realistically expect them to do under the current law? So you can't do that. So is Suella Braverman picking an unnecessary fight with the police there, maybe even turning a bit of heat on them? They're saying they're too PC. But here is something I think she has got right, OK? So she said that people coming here illegally possess values which are at odds with our country. There's a lot to get stuck into here. So she also said that small boat migrants are linked to heightened levels of criminality. Well, it's got me thinking about British values. Do these people share these values, and is that going to be a problem going forward? And I'm joined now by the international human rights lawyer David Haig. David, thank you very much. Is Suella Braverman not stating the bleeding obvious, which is that quite a lot of people coming over here on small boats are coming from countries that do not have the same values and norms as us, and that may well be dangerous?
I think she needs to clarify what she means by values, because obviously certainly what I would term as values in the UK, things like democracy, rule of law, integrity, liberty, and tolerance, things like that, are probably things that she's not shown in making that comment. Now, the worry that I have in this, from a legal perspective, but in general, is that she is our Home Secretary. And she has made comments where it looks like there's tinges of xenophobia and discrimination. So let's fast forward a little bit, Patrick, to next year, let's say, for instance, the Act's gone through, the Immigration Act's gone through, and she's making discretionary decisions, trying to disapply the orders of the
Can I ask? Could I ask just on that? I think it's very easy to lob out things about xenophobia and stuff. I mean, is it not just a simple matter of fact that women's rights in a lot of Middle Eastern countries, and indeed India, for example, are not what they are here? Gay rights, again, not what they are here. And actually, indeed, if I do look at a study that we've been talking about rather a lot on the show today about just general levels of racism in a lot of countries, a lot of countries score higher than us, including places like Iran, for example, where a lot of these people are supposedly coming from in small boats. I just wonder, down the line, once this plays out and these people arrive here and live here, and we're talking a decade on or or 20 years on, is there not a school of thought that says a lot of people are coming to this country who may well have sexist and homophobic views? And if it was other people walking around with those views, who wouldn't be tolerant of that?
I mean, I agree with you, certainly. The countries, the majority of the countries that people are coming from, the majority of the people crossing the channel are from Muslim countries and from countries that have, the countries and the rulers that have very discriminatory practices in terms of LGBT rights, in terms of women's rights. So that's absolutely true. Whether or not those are the values of people coming, a lot of people flee those countries because of those discriminatory practices. So I think there's certainly very much value in what you have said, and I agree with an awful lot of it. But I think, we need to look at the facts of this. We can't just use a broad brush and paint every single person that comes over on the channel as having different values. And I think it's worrying that our Home Secretary, of all people, would be the person that would say that. And in any event, I don't see the point in that language other than obviously, as a political vote winner for her and showing her or pretending to show her as a strong Home Secretary. It's not helping the situation. It's not helping resolve the issues that we've got of people crossing the channel at the moment.
OK, look, David, thank you very, very much. That's David Hayter, who is an international human rights lawyer and a regular here on GB News, it must be said. I do wonder whether or not Suella Braverman was just trying to open the eyes of some people. They say, it's all very well and good saying, refugees welcome and I heart refugees and all of this. But if we look at some of the values that some people coming across the channel may well have, is that compatible with the same values as a lot of people who are doing a lot of the welcoming? And is this a problem that's waiting to happen? Many people would disagree with that. It's a school of thought, though, isn't it? GBviews at gbnews.uk. Now, William and Kate have been in Wales and stand by, let me tell you, for some spectacular footage of the heir to the throne. I have not seen this footage yet, so I am hoping it is indeed spectacular. I don't get done under the Trade Descriptions Act. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories. Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Now, a couple have lost their case against a school that forced their 4-year-old child to take part in a pride parade. Izzy and Steve Montague say that they felt intimidated and discriminated against for challenging the school. I am joined now by Izzy Montague. Thank you very much, Izzy. Great to have you on the show. Can you just talk me through exactly what happened here then? So a 4-year-old, your 4-year-old at the time, was, forced to take part in a pride event? Go on.
Yeah, so at the beginning of June, this was 2018, the school, Heathers Farm, decided that they were going to celebrate LGBT Pride Month. They had done other things before, but in June, they decided that they wanted to do LGBT Pride Month, and they decided to tell parents on a school blog. And they gave a very open, candid form of why they were doing it. It was about the history of LGBT, Stonewall, and that they were quite proud to do it. And at the end of the month, they were going to do a pride parade and invite all the parents along to do this. And then as a result of that, I only found out at the last minute. And that's when I decided that it wasn't something that we could do.
So why not then? So go on, just explain to me why not? Because, look, as I'm sure you're aware, some people might be watching this now and thinking, well, you're homophobic.
No, we're Christian, so it's not something that we would ever celebrate. It's not anything that I have ever known any Christian to celebrate. So obviously it was, going to be a no straight away. And we just thought that the school was going to respect our Christian views. They had respected other people's views when they don't want to take part in religious, anything that they've done at the school like that. So Easter parades, nativities, they've always said that, people can object to it and remove themselves from anything like that. So we just thought it would be the same for us. Clearly it wasn't. And it just went, completely out of hand, to the point that we went to a school meeting. We were told that we were homophobic. The head teacher's daughter wore a lovely T-shirt to the meeting, just basically telling us that we should be quiet because we were showing homophobic, transphobic views. So we decided because of, yes?
Well, yeah, I mean, the overarching view on this, I suppose, is that for parents who don't want a very young child, who I doubt is of an age to understand really any of this, to take part in it, that parental decision about the upbringing of your child was taken out of your hands.
Yeah, correct. And this was followed through with the court case that the verdict that we just received. Basically, you send your child to school and they can do whatever they want with your child. And if that is, something that they deem as homophobic, transphobic or anything, then that's their decision to make, not yours as a parent.
But where does this end then? So let's just say that you didn't want your child to attend an event at a school hosted by a drag queen, for example, who happened to, be in a state of undress. This precedent means that you presumably would face punishment if you didn't want your child to look at that.
Correct. What the judge basically said was that the school, were very proud of celebrating LGBT. There was never a question that they were celebrating it, but it was bizarre When we got to court, they decided that they weren't celebrating it because they realised the implications of celebrating LGBT pride, of what that could do to somebody like ourselves who are Christian. So the court case was very much based around denying that that's what they were doing. So the ruling is still very much based in law that you can't celebrate this, especially if it goes against the parental wishes. But like I said, the school went to court and denied that this is what they were doing.
Right. And just finally, if that's all right, Izzy, so do you feel that as a Christian, your beliefs were ignored and actually potentially patronised and responded to with hatred?
Correct, and the school did that, and so did the judge. The judge very much made a mockery out of our beliefs, claiming that we do celebrate LGBT as part of our Christian beliefs, and therefore the school did nothing wrong. So it's very much those who are in positions who should be protecting our children, our laws, are basically just using their positions to override parents.
Yeah, and I think
to
as
make
well,
a mock-up of it.
Dare I say it as well? I think using children as a battering ram to hammer through their own, virtue signalling ideologies.
Personal agenda.
Exactly that. Look, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. Chat soon and take care, all right? That is Izzy there. Izzy Montague, whose 4-year-old child at the time was, apparently anyway, forced to take part in some kind of pride event. Right now, the Prince and Princess of Wales, are in Wales, I should say. And they've been in Merthyr Tydfil today to visit the Central Beacons Mountain Rescue Team to mark the organisation's 60th birthday. And the royal couple met mountain rescue volunteers and even had a hand at abseiling. Gosh, there you go, that's the spectacular footage. There they are, abseiling. And they currently are meeting climbers and community members this evening at the nearby Dowlais Rugby Club. And the visit is of special importance to Prince William, who worked as an RAF search and rescue pilot before becoming a senior royal. To give us the latest is GB News' royal reporter is Cameron Walker. Cameron, what's been going on for us there then in Wales, this spectacular visit?
Absolutely, Patrick. Yes, good afternoon. I mean, it's a very wet and windy day here in Wales, and the theme has very much been one of outdoor adventure for the Prince and Princess. They have been spotted, as you have seen in the footage, abseiling down a cliff in what used to be called the Brecon Beacons. Now, of course, it's called Brechennog National Park here in Wales. For those radio listeners, I would suggest you go on our social media channels and look at the footage, because it really is spectacular. But Prince William and Princess Catherine are very much continuing their mission to deepen their understanding and try and get trust and respect of the people of Wales, meeting local communities, finding out what really matters to them, and it's understood they really want to be kind of ambassadors for the people of Wales. But today they are celebrating the Central Beacons Mountain Rescue Team's 60th anniversary. They've been doing abseiling, as you've seen in the pictures. They also had a go at medical support training and had a demonstration with dog search and rescue as well. They saw some of that. Prince William is, of course, patron of the Mountain Rescue of England and Wales, and it's exercises he'll be very familiar with because, of course, back in the day, he was an air ambulance pilot himself and an RAF rescue search and rescue helicopter. Now, here behind me is very busy. You may see some kids in the background who have rushed from school to be here because the Prince and Princess of Wales are expected to do a walkabout at this, just outside this local rugby club here, because this is where the mountain rescue people come to hang out after a day's work in the national park. And Prince William and Princess Catherine actually arrived with lots of pizzas because there's a little Dragon pizza van in the car park, and they bought 12 pizzas, and I've got the order here: 3 margaritas, 3 pepperonis, 3 barbecue chickens, and 3 goat's cheese. That's more than £120 worth of pizzas. I actually tried some of it a little bit earlier, and it's spectacular pizza, Patrick, I have to say so. So they've gone into the community centre. They are thanking the workers, meeting their families, and then, as I said, they are going to be expected to do a walkabout, meeting the people of Wales before they go off to have a night here in Wales, and then they'll be continuing on with more engagements tomorrow. So 2-day visits for the Prince and Princess.
Fantastic. I must say, Karen, I am incredibly jealous of the pizza that was dished out there. So there you go. Cameron, great stuff. Hopefully it makes up for us making you stand out in the rain for most of the day. Cameron Walker there, GBNews' royal reporter. And of course, we'll be seeing a lot of Cameron, won't we, across this channel as we gear up for the coronation. Now, moving on, here's what I've got coming up in the next hour. It's official. Britain is one of the least racist countries in the world. I'll be talking about all of that. Bullying accusations lobbied at another government minister by the civil service and much, much more. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News and we are Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing. We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope?
It's very much so.
And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, everybody. Patrick Christys here on GB News with you for the next hour. And we start with some sad news about Jerry Springer. He sadly passed away at the age of 79, the legendary TV talk show host. He changed the game. I'm reliably informed that we do have some proper Jerry Springer archive footage to bring you a little bit later on. So there we go. In other news, though, closer to home, apparently now Britain, it's official, is one of the least racist countries in the world. I think this will do wonders to shut the old race lobby up, won't it? We'll have more on that. Find out exactly which countries we are less racist than. Is Steve Bartley a bully? Is the civil service a bunch of snowflakes who are coming for another minister that they ideologically oppose? That's certainly one way of looking at it. We'll be talking about whether or not our health minister is indeed a bully. And coronation apathy as well, yes. So apparently people in Scotland just don't really care about the fact that we've got a coronation coming up. Do you care? Do you think people are being far too miserable or not? We've got some fantastic vox pops with people in Scotland, and it is, well, it went as you would expect. Anyway, Patrick Christys on GB News. Yep, get your views coming in. GB Views at gbnews.uk. Loads coming your way this hour. It's official. Britain is not really a racist country at all. So, you know, have that. GB Views at gbnews.uk. Now, though, headlines with Polly.
Patrick, thank you. The top stories at 5 o'clock. The Foreign Secretary says the government's continuing to assist British nationals in leaving Sudan, and he's urged them to make their way to the airport for evacuation as soon as possible. British forces are racing to rescue as many people as they can before the ceasefire ends tonight. More than 530 British citizens have been flown to safety as of yesterday evening. The government says there are more yet to come. 16,000 people have fled Sudan across the border into Egypt, including 14,000 Sudanese. Speaking in the House of Commons, James Cleverly said the UK was also looking into helping countries with no diplomatic presence in the country.
For those on the ground, as you would expect, we are prioritising those in greatest need through allocating seats based on vulnerability, starting with families with children, the elderly, the disabled, or people with documented medical conditions. We have been notifying British nationals registered with us about the evacuation flights, as well as announcing them through our travel advice and also through organic social media networks of British nationals in Sudan.
Well, in news here at home, a murder investigation has been launched into the death of a pregnant teacher in Glasgow. Morel Sturrock was found dead on Tuesday morning. She was 29 weeks pregnant. Her baby didn't survive. There's now a manhunt underway for her fiancé, David Yates. His car was found at Mugdock Country Park, where police are now focusing their search. Strike action planned by the Royal College of Nursing for the 2nd of May would be unlawful. A High Court judge has ruled the RCN's 6-month mandate for strike action will have lapsed by Tuesday. Protests by nurses have been taking place outside the court, with signs reading, "Silencing nurses is silencing patients." The RCN's General Secretary, Pat Cullen, says the government has lost trust of nurses and the public.
This is the darkest day in this dispute so far. Any government that would drag their nursing staff through the courts, they've won their legal battle today, but what this has led to is they've lost nursing and they've lost the public. They've taken the most trusted profession through the courts by the least trusted people.
Well, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, is urging the government to resolve the pay dispute.
The nurses don't want to be on strike. They want a government that's negotiating and talking to them, not taking them to court. I think most people are scratching their head and saying, instead of going to court, just get on with resolving the underlying issues. They've created the conditions that have put huge pressure on people because the economy hasn't worked for over a decade now. Many people have had stagnant wages, their living standards have gone down, not up. So the government bears a heavy responsibility, and I think most people would say, get on with it, get round the table and resolve these issues.
Well, schools in England are facing disruption today as tens of thousands of teachers have gone on strike. National Education Union members have walked out over pay. Year 11 and Year 13 classes are being prioritised, with exams just weeks away. But more strikes have been announced for the summer term after union members rejected the government's pay offer. Joint General Secretary of the NEU, Mary Bousted, says teachers are experiencing hardship.
We've got teachers who are skipping meals, we've got teachers not heating their homes, we've got teachers taking on second jobs when they already work the most unpaid overtime of all professions. That's the reality of what teachers are facing, and that is what the government has to face, that reality, if we want a well-educated nation and if we want the education that our children deserve.
And the ASLEF union has announced its train drivers will stage 3 new strikes in their long-running dispute over pay. 2 of the walkouts will happen in May and 1 will take place on the 3rd of June. That's the day of the FA Cup final. And all that after the union rejected a 4% pay offer.
The government's announced today it's unveiling its biggest shake-up of gambling in the UK in 15 years. It says it aims to redress the power imbalance between punters and operators. Checks to better protect even those unable to afford small losses are among the plans, as well as maximum stakes for online slot machines. Culture Secretary Lucy Fraser says it'll also help prevent gambling addiction. And as you've been hearing, the US talk show host Jerry Springer has died at the age of 79. He was a prominent figure on American television networks for nearly 3 decades, best known for showcasing everyday family dramas on his show. Television was his second career. He was previously a politician and even served as mayor of Cincinnati at one point. The British American passed away peacefully at his home in Chicago. Jerry Springer, who died today at the age of 79. You're with GB News. More news in half an hour.
Now, back to the news that we brought you a little earlier in the show. And sadly, Jerry Springer, the TV host who absolutely revolutionised the talk show game forever, has died at the age of 79. His show, which ran for 27 seasons, pioneered inviting everyday people on as guests. I think every day is stretching it slightly there, but there we go. And confronting them with the people that they'd betrayed or hurt or whatever they'd done, most often their partners. And every show started with a bang. And once the show got going, things tended to become a little bit feisty as well.
Hold on, Marlon. It ain't even what you think, okay? All right, I was in and out. What you mean you were in and out? You tapped out before I did.
Now, why did you lie about it, Sean?
Yeah, why did you lie about it, Sean? Because I know you get jealous, Marvin. Come on, man, don't give me that. You're jealous. Well, maybe I wouldn't be acting like this if you wasn't trying to steal my girlfriend.
Fight each other on national television, come on! Anyway, we won't see any of that anymore. To give us his reaction to this story is the host of the Politics People podcast, is Paul Dudridge, who joins us from stateside. There we go. Look, obviously, you know, sad news at the passing of Jerry Springer, but a wonderful opportunity, if ever we needed one, to hail how iconic his show actually was. I mean, very, very rarely, I think, these days would you ever see a show that centres around you know, I suppose maybe people trailer trash, fighting each other on national television. There we go. I said it. How do you react to the sad loss?
These are my people. What are you talking about? These are the people I grew up among. Oh, believe me. I tell you, we didn't even have the wheels on our trailer. It was a shed. But the thing about him that he did creatively, and you know, there's a lot of people turn their nose up at this kind of content, is that he centered real people's voices in an entertainment format. Up until this point, you just had sort of posh sociological majors and professors studying these people as opposed to actually giving them a voice, and it worked. I mean, 27 seasons, as you said. They had to take the show off in the end, but there was always an audience for it. And this predates reality TV, predates, you know, Brexit, Trump. The idea of real people's voices being actually accessible on a mass medium is what he brought it in. He initiated that, and he did it beautifully.
In some way, I think there is a wonderful study to be had here, because as you rightly said, people turn their nose up to it, and the kind of pearl-clutching, chattering classes, oh my God, this is absolutely horrendous, we can't possibly have this, flying in the face of the millions, tens of millions, and over the course of 27 seasons or however long it is, billions of people who tuned into this religiously because they actually loved it.
Absolutely. Look, it was successful. It was tabloid. It was really entertaining. And like I said, it does get characterised as perhaps exploitative, but it kind of really wasn't. It was actually very heartwarming. The audience were fully in on the entertainment, on the joke. I don't think he was cruel or high-handed about it. I don't think he humiliated people. He just gave a full, unedited outlet for people to be able to air their grievances. Again, as I said, we're just so used to, if you like, absurd chattering class kind of entertainment that just washes over us. This is such an affront to so many people's sensitivities. Look, it's a bit like the Lady Chatterley trial, if I can be a bit esoteric. You know, when would you let your wife or servant read this book? It's just like, no, normal people can't handle this kind of entertainment. It must be filtered by us. And it's just like, no, it was. If it hadn't have worked, it wouldn't have lasted 27 seasons.
100%. It is an iconic TV show. And look, from my take on it, I do think it was exploitative. I do. But I also think that the power when it comes to this is with the audience, right? And the fact is that clearly tens of millions of people didn't care about the idea that maybe someone might not have been acutely aware of how far-reaching their fight with their sister, who's also a stripper, is going to get pumped out around the world at a particular moment in time. This show could never be made today, though, could it? Even though it is responsible for a lot of the spin-offs.
Well, exactly. Well, look, you know, famously they took off that chap who seems to have gone into semi-retirement, the British version. Yeah, they don't make these kind of shows. They won't make these kind of shows because everything now is just completely. You know, he did it. He was getting higher ratings than Oprah because there were so many fewer outlets then. Now we have the TikToks and the YouTubes, etc. There's never going to be that central focused audience being able to sustain it, and there isn't the appetite for it amongst the great and the good who decide on commissioning these kind of shows.
The thing is, though, money talks, right? Money talks. And the reality is, and people might not like this, but the reality is, if you gave me a DNA test and a lie detector test every single day at some point on this show, like it or lump it, we would get millions of viewers.
Listen, I have signed the petition to make that happen about 4 times now. You've read my blog. Honestly, we want you tested every day, and I think the ratings would be even more of a juggernaut than they currently are.
Paul, look, thank you very much. And, apparently there are people outside Jerry Springer's house, well, one of his many houses, shouting, Jerry, Jerry, Jerry. And he is truly a chap
Jerry is trending. Jerry is trending on Twitter. Isn't that a beautiful accolade for him? That's a mark of the man. He really cuts through people.
Paul, thank you for coming on at short notice. Paul Duddridge, who is the host, of course, of the Politics People podcast, just reacting, of course, to the sad news that Jerry Springer has passed away at the age of 79. But, you know, an opportunity to have a look back at this chap's legendary career as well, really. But there we go. Moving on. Suella Braverman says that people coming here illegally possess values which are at odds with our country. The Home Secretary's also said that small boat migrants are linked to heightened levels of criminality, but this has caused a lot of controversy. Now, I'm joined now by the lawyer, Eunice Lannat, who's going to talk to me about all of this. Eunice, thank you very much. Do you think that Suella Braverman is right to raise a contentious point that potentially, dare I say it, some people coming here across the channel do not have our norms and values, and that's not necessarily a great thing for Britain?
Good afternoon, Patrick. Thank you for inviting me again. Well, she's within her rights to raise it. Doesn't mean to say she's right, correct in what she's saying. And again, as ever, with recent history of our Home Secretary, she's unfortunately way off the mark, inappropriate in what she's saying, and opening her mouth without any consideration of what's coming out of her mouth and whether there's any substance and whether it's backed up by data.
Yeah, I mean, is the data not just the rules and the laws and the norms in the countries that a lot of people are claiming to come from? I mean, do you not find it possibly slightly unbelievable that a huge amount of Afghans, Iranians and people coming from the Middle East might suddenly develop incredibly strong positive feelings for the LGBTQ plus community or indeed women?
Well, I'm trying to get my head around the quantum leap that you've done as to what the Home Secretary has said into LGBT and women's rights.
Well, that's the values I think she's talking about, isn't it?
Well, she's mentioned about British values and criminality. Now, has she got evidence that vast sums of people that are coming across the channel are actually turning into criminals. Where's the evidence for that? Where's the data?
The National Crime Agency
did last weekend. It's the same thing with this last weekend with Pakistani grooming gangs. You know, where's the data? Where's the evidence to say that Pakistani men are overrepresented and vastly involved in grooming gangs? I mean, I'm sure that her own department would have warned her that the very next day that there was the case proceeding in the Birmingham in the West Midlands Crown Court, and the very next day we were going to hear reports of a massive white grooming gang. So again,
again with that though, I am just saying this genuinely politely. I mean, are you with your lawyer hat on? Are you kind of expertly just deliberately putting up another side to this that potentially you are willfully ignoring some other elements of it? I mean, the National Crime Agency have come out and said that there is clear indication of Albanian gangs, etc., who are now operating with impunity when it comes to things like the drugs trade and other elements of criminality. We know, of course, that there have been huge elements of the Channel migrant Albanian population who've been infiltrated by these people. They're saying it themselves, because a lot of the modern slavery angles of this are, oh gosh, we were forced to come here by some kind of human trafficker to work in criminality. So they are saying it themselves. And so, I mean, she's right, isn't she?
My understanding of people that are coming across, largely refugees, are coming from Afghanistan, coming from Syria, coming from places of conflict. In fact, places like Iraq that and Afghanistan that we've gone and invaded and created a problem. Now, I hear what you say. As I said, largely I see the refugees coming across as people that are fleeing persecution. Now, again, if she had provided data, then that would help substantiate the argument that she's trying to make. But what she's doing again is she's trying to play dog whistle politics to a particular section of the gallery.
Do you not foresee at any point in the future perhaps a slight issue coming with people who are increasingly becoming very progressive in this country, and certain groups of people who are becoming very progressive in this country, and a large influx of people from countries who are, I suppose if I put it politely, more conservative or traditionalist or orthodox perhaps in their views? Are we not on a collision course here at some point, do you think?
I think you better explain what you're trying to what you're trying to say, because I've been brought up with British values, and my value. I was born and brought up here. I've never lived anywhere else other than Great County of Great County Yorkshire. And how I've been brought up is I judge people as I find them, not by stereotyping, not by putting them in groups. And I like to take people as I find them, and I make my own judgments. Now, you better explain what you're trying to say to me.
I'll be very direct with what I'm trying to say to you, which is I think it might be a difficulty with people coming from a country that has got a long history of being run by the Taliban, and then coming here and expecting to just assimilate effortlessly into our norms and values, and especially when it comes to things like women's rights, etc.
Could it be the case that they're trying to flee the very thing that you're trying to describe to me?
It could be
coming here because they don't agree. They don't agree with those views, and they've actually got what we would deem to be British values and standards. Could that be the case?
It absolutely could.
And they wish to assimilate, and they wish to be part of British society, and they wish to live by British values.
It absolutely could be the case. I think it might be reasonable to suspect that when it comes to, you know, a big influx of people from just other cultures, and that just to the reality of the situation. It's not passing aspersions on it. I'm just saying when it comes to a straightforward element of compatibility, I mean, it is completely reasonable. I mean, we only have to evidence that, don't we? By, for example, things like when the World Cup was in Qatar and we were all going over there and told we have to respect their norms and values. That in itself proves that there are differences of norms and values. And so, I mean, that's just pretty straightforward, isn't it?
I'm pleased you brought up the issue of the World Cup in Qatar, because the virtue signalling and the hypocrisy that I saw when the World Cup was happening in Qatar was just on a level it's never been seen before. Because what was never reported, what was in fact prohibited from reporting, was the amount of even renowned media personalities, female media personalities, that were putting on Twitter and social media. The fact that it's the only place in the world that they've been where they felt not objectified sexually, absolutely safe for their safety, and that was in Qatar. The fact that we were virtually signalling about human rights and violations of human rights and how migrant workers were treated. Now, let's apply those standards that we set.
I agree with you on that.
This is a really important point. But let's apply the standards that we set when the World Cup was in Qatar about how we treat migrant workers. Now, look at how we're treating people that want to come here as refugees. Forget about migrant workers. There's an argument that Qatar were actually treating migrant workers better than we do.
Right, I'm sorry, but that is absolute rubbish, isn't it? That is absolute rubbish. As it currently stands, but you know that's rubbish. As it currently stands, people can come across the channel illegally and be put up in 4-star hotels, right? In Qatar,
that's a different debate.
They were being forced to build football stadiums and they died as a result of that, a lot of them. And that is just rubbish. And yeah, there you go.
You're totally missing my point. You're totally missing my point. When you're talking about migrant workers, Qatar will allow migrant workers to enter their country. We won't. Qatar will allow migrant workers to work in their country. We will send them back to Rwanda. We won't even allow them to come here.
I am going to end it here because, with respect, I don't think I'm missing your point. I don't think you've got one. So we're going to leave it there. That's Eunice Lynn out there, who is indeed, believe it or not, a lawyer. Right, OK, so moving on. Steve Barclay is facing allegations that he's bullied some of his staff. But is it just the civil service at it again? I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, and we are Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back now to more moaning from the civil service, apparently. After getting rid of Dominic Raab, it looks like they're now out to get Steve Barclay. It's reported that Barclay is the subject of informal complaints about his behaviour. Downing Street has insisted that ministers must be able to robustly challenge civil servants. Now, while Foreign Secretary James Cleverly has defended Barclay and said the Health Secretary is absolutely not a bully. I'm joined now by our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. Darren, is this deja vu in terms of Dominic Raab or not? What's going on with Steve Barclay?
Well, at the moment, it's not, in the sense that we've not really had any formal complaints against the Health Secretary. These are two anonymous civil servants who've gone to The Guardian to report that they believe that Steve Barclay is a bully, or at least involved in what they would describe as bullying behaviour. Now, what does that constitute? Well, according to them, he's regularly blasted staff in front of others in the office, and that he is constantly angry, and that he hauls people over the coals and is generally a bit unpleasant. Is that bullying or not? Well, it'll be up to you at home to decide whether it is or not. Clearly there is a big debate, isn't there? A national conversation, some might say, about what is acceptable in the workplace these days compared to what may have gone on in the past. Dominic Raab clearly feels he was done over, talking about how the bar had been lowered too low when it came to what constituted bullying. He was found guilty of an independent report and had to resign. But you're right in saying there is a hell of a lot of unease, Patrick, inside government about what they view as a concerted campaign in some ways to pick off cabinet ministers. And I think they will be concerned about this. But as you say, to date, these anonymous sources have not lodged a formal complaint with the Department of Health, and thus far Downing Street have got the full backing, or given the full backing, to Steve Barclay, and saying, well, at the moment there's literally nothing to investigate.
Darren, thank you very much. Darren McCaffrey there, our political editor outside Westminster. I'm joined now by sociologist and social commentator Frank Furedi. Frank, great stuff. Great to have you on the show. Do you think that what we are witnessing here is a changing of the guard, potentially, between people who are an older school, who are not afraid to speak their mind and want stuff done, and weak snowflakes?
Yeah, I mean, what's happening is that when bullying has become popular, you have to remember that bullying used to be something that children did to each other. Since it's become migrated into the adult world, a lot of people have become infantilized, and they almost feel as if they're vulnerable children. And when you talk to some people, they basically feel they're bullied if you look at them hard, or if you criticize them, you question them. If you raise a point in a sharp way, you call the bully. I was once called a bully in the university because I kept on questioning students all the time, giving them direct questions. And it was said that if you ask direct questions, that's intimidating. So we live in a new world where you're meant to be softly, but I think what's happening now is that bullying has been weaponized. So basically, a lot of people who are anti-government, who don't like the existing cabinet members, are essentially going on record and complaining that they've been bullied as a way of undermining and destabilizing the government, and also of picking certain ministers and individuals. Yeah. And it seems to me that the government needs to get its act together and basically say that, we're in the business of making decisions, we're in the business of making hard choices. And in the course of doing that, we can't always be diplomatic and can't always smile at each other.
One of the problems is actually literally the law, because it does appear as though the emphasis is on the person who claims to have had a feeling, okay, and not on the burden of proof. So if someone feels as though that they have been discriminated against in one way or the other, that basically trumps what many people would argue is the reality of the situation, which is that they haven't been. And so that is a problem. I don't really see how that gets solved anytime soon. But, I mean, do you think that we are just doomed, really? Because what is the solution now? That everybody has to just behave like the weakest people in society, as opposed to maybe getting things done?
Well, you raise a very important question, because as long as the subjective feeling of being bullied trumps anything else, it basically means that you're guilty the minute somebody charges you with being bullied. And that's a really horrendous rule that was brought in. I think it should be scrapped, because as long as you have this very subjective definition of what a problem is, you never have an objective criterion by which to judge that. And if you allow that to continue, then basically you create a situation where what used to be called office politics turns into a battlefield that's going to have coercive impact on everybody else's lives. And not just politicians, but ordinary human beings will find that they become scared about opening their mouths they become scared of criticizing and raising difficult problems.
But they already are. They already are. I remain absolutely convinced that the kind of conversations that go on around even dinner tables at dinner parties are so heavily censored now because people don't want to just actually speak their mind. And it is a huge problem. And unfortunately, the bullying, I would argue that the bullying that is going on there is from a lot of people who bracket themselves up as very kind and lovely and fluffy people with hardcore liberal values. And actually, they're the ones who are trying to silence people. But Frank, look, thank you very, very much. Frank Ferretti, I hope you didn't feel bullied at any point there. If you did, then, you know, sorry, what we're going to do. Frank Ferretti there, who's a sociologist and a social commentator. Now, there's loads more to come between now and 6 o'clock. A poll claims that almost 3/4 of people in Scotland don't care about the coronation. Now, we've been out and about in Glasgow to find out what some Scots actually think. And it's fair to say that it might be more than 3/4 of them who don't really care about the coronation. But there's more on a survey as well that has found that Britain is one of the least racist countries in the world. We'll be talking about that. What's not to love? I'm Patrick Christys on GB News. Now, though, headlines with Polly.
Patrick, thank you. The top stories this hour. The Foreign Secretary has said the government's continuing to assist British nationals in leaving Sudan and urged them to make their way to the airport for evacuation as soon as possible. British forces are now racing to rescue as many people as they can before the ceasefire ends tonight. And James cleverly says no one can predict the situation on the ground after that. More than 530 British citizens have been flown to safety as of yesterday. 16,000, though, have fled the country, mainly across the border into Egypt, including 14,000 Sudanese. Here, strike action planned by the Royal College of Nursing for the 2nd of May would be unlawful. A High Court judge has ruled that the RCN's 6-month mandate for strike action will have lapsed by Tuesday. Protests by nurses took place outside the court with signs reading, "Silencing nurses is silencing patients." A murder investigation has been launched into the death of a pregnant teacher in Glasgow. Morel Sturrock was found dead on Tuesday morning. She'd been 29 weeks pregnant. Her baby didn't survive. There's a manhunt underway now for her fiancé, David Yates. His car was found at a nearby country park where police are focusing their search. And the government has unveiled the biggest shake-up in gambling laws for 15 years. It says it aims to redress the power imbalance between punters and operators. Gambling companies will have to step up with better checks to protect those unable to even afford the smallest losses. Plans include maximum stakes for online slot machines as well of between £2 and £15. And as you've been hearing, the US talk show host Jerry Springer has died at the age of 79. He was a prominent figure on American TV networks for nearly 3 decades, best known for showcasing everyday family dramas on his show. Television was his second career, though. He'd previously been a politician and served as the mayor of Cincinnati. The British-American passed away peacefully at his home in Chicago. And those are your latest news headlines. I'm back in half an hour. See you then.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Today's markets looking like this. The pound buying you $1.2474 and 1.1326 euros. The price of gold is £1,589.77 even an ounce. The FTSE 100 today has closed at 7,831 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
Well, there are just 10 days to go, believe it or not, until the coronation, and here at GB News we are very excited about it. But not everyone in the UK is up for it, apparently. A survey has found that almost 3/4 of people in Scotland don't care about the coronation. So we went out to Glasgow to gauge the mood.
I think it's exciting for families and that, but as a uni student, I'm not too bothered about it. I think it's costing the government a lot of money.
It's like an advertisement for the royal family, you know. I mean, they've been going through a lot of bad things lately, and a lot of Scots think it's just a waste of time, myself included.
Good.
Any more thoughts? Is it relevant for Scotland?
Oh, aye. Scotland is going to have a king and a queen to identify themselves.
Not exciting. I don't really care. I've heard of bits of it on the news, but I've not really been paying attention. I think it's a waste of time. I think it's a waste of money. I don't know how much it's going to cost, but I'm going to assume it's going to cost a lot. So
I think it's 10 million.
10 million. That seems like a waste of money to me.
Pubs open early in Glasgow, don't they? Well, looks like that. There we go. Anyway, so, well, now to a controversy, though, ahead of the coronation. The Vice President of China, Han Zheng, will be there next week, and he played a major role in China's brutal crackdown on Hong Kong's pro-democracy protests in 2019. This is part of a bit of a rogues gallery, actually, of slightly bizarre coronation invites, but I do get that it's all about soft diplomacy. The move has been heavily criticised by many Conservative MPs, but Foreign Secretary James Cleverly says that it was China's right to decide who represented their country at the coronation, and presumably not actually a massive two fingers up to this country and our monarchy. Of course, Han Zheng is not the only coronation rogue to have confirmed their attendance. I'm going to run you through a little rogues gallery. There he is. What about the Sinn Féin's deputy leader, Michelle O'Neill? So, yeah, she'll be there, apparently. Or Scotland's new Republican First Minister, Humza Yousaf. Yeah, there he is. He'll be there. And the worst of all, Prince Harry. Why has he been invited? Just put us all out of our misery and get him gone. Of course, Harry doing his best to completely obliterate any chance of reconciliation with William by blowing a court case wide open with some allegations about Prince William potentially benefiting as well financially from a hush-hush payout. But there we go. Anyway, let's get stuck into to this now. And I also want to throw it over to you guys. Don't our GBviews at gbnews.uk. Do you reckon that some of these people should actually be invited to the coronation? It is a little bit strange, I think, that we have chosen to invite on what is a massive, massive day for the country. Not in itself a delegation for the Chinese government, because clearly we do want to have trading relationships with China and just indeed any relationship with them. And I get that, but they send the guy who's responsible for essentially siphoning off Hong Kong, and we're now having to accept, rightly so, people coming from Hong Kong to seek genuine asylum from an oppressive, brutal Chinese regime. Do we really let them do that? Is it not a deliberate snub? But there we go. Get your views coming in, gbviews at gbnews.uk. Let's get stuck in, though, now to a study that undermines all the talk that racism is rampant across the United Kingdom. A new report claims that we live in one of the least racist countries in the world, and a survey of 24 nations found that just 2% of Brits wouldn't want to have someone of a different race as their neighbour. And when it comes to living alongside an immigrant or a foreign worker, the figure is only 5%. In both categories, the UK is less racist than the United States, France, Italy. I mean, I could go on, actually, because it includes China, Greece, Morocco, South Korea, Egypt, Poland, the Philippines, Indonesia, Mexico, Spain, Nigeria, France, Australia, Canada, Norway. And there you go. So basically pretty much every single country, apart from, believe it or not, Brazil and Sweden. So there we go. Now, earlier, I spoke to an actor and writer, Femi Nylander, who was deeply critical of the findings of this study. I'm going to react off the back of this, but here's a brief segment of the chat I had with Femi earlier.
Well, Patrick, do you know anything about cognitive psychology and reporting bias? It's a concept, basically, which says that when survey respondents are responding to a survey, they'll often have bias. And when you want to find something out, if you ask a question of the person who is supposedly the perpetrator of the wrong, they're not going to. No one is answering the survey going, "I am a racist." You had me on a few weeks ago, and that was a survey to talk about a different survey, and that was a survey where minorities were talking about their experiences.
Would the same not apply for
that
them?
Had a very.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? So by that logic, would the same not apply for them, because they would maybe be more inclined to say that they are suffering?
Well, that's no, but possibly. Right. You have some, but I mean, at the end of the day, if I ask someone how tall are you on a survey, if someone's 5'9", they'll probably bump it up to 6 foot or to at least 5'10".
Well, it's not Tinder, to be fair, Femi, is it? I mean,
this is a survey which asks British people if they feel like they're racist.
But surely there would be the same level of cognitive bias, right, in places like Iran, Russia, Japan, China, Greece, Morocco, South Korea, Egypt, Poland, Italy, the Philippines, Indonesia, Mexico, Spain, Nigeria, France, Austria, Australia, Canada, United States and Norway, all countries who scored higher than us. So do they not care about not seeming like racists, but we do, and we're the only ones who are trying to cover up our racism?
No, I don't think that's necessarily true. And I think that some of the countries you named, they do have big problems with xenophobia. No one said England is the only country in the world that has problems with xenophobia. Japan famously has had a lot of problems in the past with xenophobia and with seeing as itself as superior to the Koreans, to the Chinese, its immediate neighbours. So no one is saying England is the only country with xenophobia. No one is saying that some of the other countries don't deserve to be on the list. All I'm saying is that to say that the UK isn't racist because British people have said that they are not racist, and not to look at the evidence, not to look at some of the rhetoric which came out around Brexit, not to look at any of the institutional aspects which show that in the UK, people of minorities are disproportionately likely to be poor, disproportionately likely to be in the criminal justice system, disproportionately likely to be entitled to free school meals, disproportionately likely to be the victims of aggravated racially motivated crime. I mean, the evidence of Britain being a society which has serious problems with institutional racism are all there.
Really? I mean, I did find it fascinating that this study, which categorically shows that Britain is not a racist country, in fact, it's one of the least racist countries in the world, is not valid because people will have lied about it. People will have said no. But then you have studies that come out that appear to show that people do suffer things like institutional racism and that there's been issues there and people are suffering deeply in this country. But those studies are OK. We can trust those studies, but we can't trust this one. And I do wonder what it's going to take, because then again, we're into unconscious bias territory, aren't we? Sometimes we can't just believe the evidence that we see around us. When you walk outside and you see a cohesive society which is incredibly diverse and multi-ethnic, and you see the fact that we are welcoming huge numbers of people here from all over the world, and it does appear to be that people are desperate to come to the UK from all corners of the world, we have to ignore that, and we have to look at the idea that we are indeed some inherently racist country. I mean, the UN itself described us as having ethnic minorities in Britain living in fear as a result of systemic racism. I'm just not sure that's true. And then you end up with a study like this, which has been published fantastically by a company called Unheard, and also it's the Policy Institute at King's College London. And I did put that to Femi as well. And I said to him, well, if they published an economic study, you'd probably believe that, wouldn't you? But you don't believe this. And I just feel as though some people maybe are trying to have their cake and eat it. And why can't we just see the reality of Britain? GBviews at gbnews.uk. Get your views coming in. Just a reminder, though, of some of the sad news that broke earlier on in this show, which is that legendary talk show host Jerry Springer has died. I'm going to be having a little look at some of Jerry Springer's best bits. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, and we are Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories. Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Yes, well, welcome back, everybody. Patrick Christys here on GB News. Now, very shortly, I'm going to be handing over to Michelle Dewberry, so make sure you don't miss that. She's going to be hot-footing it in to tell you exactly what's coming up. But this clip was brought to my attention a bit earlier on. So today has been a big day for the health service. So nurses, as we know, some of them, a 54% of a 61% turnout at the Royal College of Nursing, voted to go on strike. Now, the Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, was saying, well, this strike is illegal, and to be fair now, it turns out that it is unlawful, because it's been through the courts and they're not going to be able to strike. But we did have a clip earlier on of Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner just reacting to this, saying, essentially in a nutshell, that they thought that they should deal with the real issue of the government and not take nurses to court over this. But I was watching this and I thought, doesn't it look a bit like when an apologetic dad comes to knock on someone's front door to apologise for the behaviour of his daughter? That just absolutely got me. It was like, look, Angela's very, very sorry about what she said to you at school, all right? And she won't be saying it to you again. Will you, Angela? Will you? No, I won't. I won't. There we go. So, there we go. I just thought I'd bring that to your attention. Anyway, Michelle Dewberry has hot-footed us into the studio for us now. Michelle, yes, what have you got lined up for us? You've got a bit of time today, which I quite like, actually.
Oh, gosh, does that mean I've got to talk to you?
Yeah, it does.
I try hard to avoid you, don't I? What have I got coming up? Well, I do want to get into this RCN nurses thing because, as anyone will know that watches my show, my mum and sister are nurses. I want them to get the pay rise, but there's something about the approach of the RCN that I don't really like, and I want to get into that because it's really divided opinion. Teachers as well, further strikes there happening. What else have I got coming up? Oh, yeah, oil, gas, etc. Should we be just going for it now and trying to extract it from the UK or not? Again, people divided on that one, aren't they? Also, National Bullying Helpline, they're raising concerns, right, about the kids that are filming the battering of the other kids and putting it on social media. I basically, and you might think I'm a bit harsh, I blame it on parents.
You blame bullies on parents?
No, I think
all the kids being bullied.
Feral kids that are like going around behaving absolutely appallingly. Well, I'm really sorry, but I think the buck stops with you as a parent. It's your job.
But one of the problems is this, which is that now it appears to be that schools are reaching into the lives of parents and saying, we're going to try and parent your kid better. And that's right across the board on loads of different social aspects of it. And I wonder now, is it any wonder that parents, you know, look at it and go, well, I have raised a little terror, but it's not my fault. It's probably
that's a lame excuse.
Yeah, it is a lame excuse, but it's probably got ADHD and, you know, it's the teacher's fault.
If you sit there and because you know if your kid is a bit of a wrong and you know, unless you just know. And I think turning around and blaming it on the school or your neighbour or this issue or that issue, it's just irresponsible, it's book passing, and it doesn't wash with me. So actually, I would go as far as saying, if you breed these kids, if you bring them up in this way and they behave in this way, you, as the parent, it's you that should be getting charged.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you, absolutely, and I think it's a problem.
There you go, I've done my show now, I can go home.
Yeah, no, you can. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll definitely be watching that, because I think you're absolutely spot on, and I'm pleased that you actually say what a lot of people don't say, which is, you know, when you see those kids running around a restaurant, for example, ruining your meal, I want to give them a little kick under the table.
I've got a confession to make now, because I did get told off the other day by a restaurant guy for letting my child... It wasn't a posh restaurant, it was just like an average pub, and he told me off because I did let my child run around. I did.
Right.
Have I just contradicted myself massively?
Well, no, I think there's a difference to it, isn't there? The ones who are like, you know, who are being really, really outrageous, and the other ones.
And it was, to be fair to me, before everyone starts crying, it was quite a quiet pub. It wasn't a posh restaurant, and it was in the middle of the day, not like a romantic Saturday night where everyone's trying to have quiet adult time.
Absolutely. Well, look, Michelle Dewberry will be with you very, very shortly, and I'll tell you what, that sounds like an absolute firecracker of a show, doesn't it? But more on Jerry Springer. So the TV host who changed the talk show game forever has now died at the age of 79. He was born in London, served as mayor of Cincinnati, and provided, let's be honest with you, huge amounts of absolute TV gold moments. I am joined now by American blogger and apparently a legend himself, Perez Hilton. Perez, how have you managed to cope with the news of Jerry Springer's sad passing?
You know, I celebrate his life and look back at what an eclectic career he had, from politics, from law, to about 30 years as a talk show host. He, to me, and many others, is and will remain a great inspiration.
Yeah, indeed. What do you think made him so special? Do you think it was just his ability to unashamedly provide TV that, despite what a lot of woke people might think is unacceptable, is deeply popular?
I think it was Jerry's ability to not pass judgment on what was unfolding in front of him, which for many episodes of his show was quite shocking and controversial. That's what he was known for, the scandalous guests, the fights that had to be broken apart. And for us, the viewer, it was great escapism. We watched that and we said to ourselves, my life is not as bad as that person's.
But the thing is, you're so right. You could be having an absolutely terrible day. You could be sitting around in the ruins of your own life, right? And you'd turn on Jerry Springer and there would be someone having an even bigger shocker than you. Do you think that he had a certain likability, didn't he? He had a certain likability. Everyone felt as though they knew him.
Exactly. That everyman quality definitely served him well. You know, it's not like Joan Rivers, whom I loved, another icon, rest in peace. But Joan was a bit like the expression, she was like Marmite. You either loved her or you hated her. Whereas Jerry Springer was universally, I would say, adored, and quite specially all ages. College students watched Jerry Springer when they were in their dorms in between classes. Grandmothers at home watched Jerry Springer. People waiting in doctors' offices would watch Jerry Springer, and he was on our televisions for 3+ decades.
He was, really, and he was an absolute institution. Perez, do you think they could make the show today? Because a lot of people have tried, but they've had to turn it down a bit.
I don't know if that's what society wants, or at least that's not what they say. We're a lot of hypocritical people who say one thing and then really want another. At the end of the day, shocking does well, and people still want that kind of savory content. So I think it could be done well. And you know who would do it very well? Perez Hilton.
Oh, never misses a beat, this guy. Never misses a beat. Good stuff. Hey, Perez, absolute pleasure. You take care, and thank you for coming on at short notice. Much appreciated. A little bit of a stardust to finish off the show. Much needed. Perez Hilton, American blogger, and it says here in my auto cue, legend. There we go. Right, OK, everyone. Look, thank you very, very much for everybody who's been getting in touch throughout the course of this show as well. I've been Patrick Christys. I will hand you over to Michelle Dewberry, who's got a fantastic, wide-ranging show coming your way. It will include as well a topic that I think a lot of you will feel very, very strongly about. Are unruly kids actually the fault of their own creators? Is it the fault of the parents? Should the parents be disciplined? In Patrick Christys' Britain, they certainly would, but I'm going to have to try to lobby Michelle to get me on as a panellist at some point on one of her shows, because she always manages to press my buttons when it comes to the topics that she covers. So look, I'll be back again tomorrow at 3 p.m. for another lively outing. Thank you very much, everyone who's tuned in, who's got in touch, and make sure you watch back the clips, of course, on YouTube and indeed on Twitter at GBNews. See you tomorrow at 3. Peace out.
Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Turning warmer as we head towards the weekend, but it's been definitely turning wetter today. That rain's still around in places tomorrow, but it should brighten up as we go through the day, and some places really starting to warm up by tomorrow afternoon. Today, though, we've got this little weather feature. Set of weather fronts just sploshing in some rain from the southwest, reaching eastern areas through this evening. Some drier spells developing overnight across parts of central Scotland and southern England. But for most, expect outbreaks of rain and drizzle to come and go. Some of that rain heavy in places, quite breezy at times as well. But with all the cloud and the rain, it will be a cold night, much milder than recent nights, with temperatures in the south staying in double figures. A grey start, though, for most of us to Friday morning, and still quite damp as well. Some areas of rain crossing back through Scotland, northeast England especially, but slowly skies will start to brighten, and by lunchtime parts of the west cheering up, and by the afternoon most places dry. Possibility of one or two heavy showers coming into Northern Ireland and northeastern parts of Scotland, always likely to stay fairly damp, but generally turning drier with some sunshine. Quite warm in the south, 18, 19, feeling colder with the cloud across much of the northeast as the northerly winds return the chill to northern Scotland during Friday and Friday night. Most places dry on Friday night, though, the cloud tending to break up a little bit, leading into a bit of a mixed picture for Saturday. Cloudy with some rain across central and southern Scotland, and then through the day some heavy showers may be developing in northern England, North Wales, Northern Ireland, whereas in the south, actually most places looking dry and bright on Saturday, and largely dry in northern Scotland, although it's still cold here. Elsewhere, though, it is starting to turn milder. Temperatures in the south could reach 20 degrees Celsius, and it will turn milder even in northern Scotland by the time we get to Sunday and Monday. A mixture this weekend of lengthy dry and bright periods, but some heavy showers.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners